I was walking along the beach when I heard loud, angry voices carrying over the wind. I stopped, looked around, and spotted a guy and a girl screaming at each other. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but they sounded furious and incredibly aggressive. I slowed down and started walking the other way. I wasn't trying to get mixed up in some private fight. Suddenly, I heard a loud splash. I whipped my head around and saw the guy shove the woman. She went flying backward into the shallow water, landing flat on her back with a huge spray around her while he stood there, looking down at her, seething. I'm from Ohio, and I had come to the beach party for my best friend Maverick's 20th birthday bash. His dad was a big-shot industrialist, so the party was being held at a massive beach house they owned in Ball Harbor. Maverick's a pretty charming guy and kind of popular, so the party was packed with people, loud music, and plenty of drinks. Seriously, he went all out to make it as loud and wild as possible. I was having a great time at first, but around midnight, the noise became too much, and I felt like I needed a break. So, I excused myself, left the crowd behind, and headed down the beach toward a quieter stretch where the glow of the bonfire barely reached. It was peaceful. Moonlight reflected off the water, and all I could hear were the waves and the distant sounds of the ocean. I was in a great mood until I witnessed what looked like an attempted murder. The woman was struggling in the water, while the man showed no interest in helping her up. Somehow, she managed to get to her feet and started screaming at him. He rushed forward, grabbed her ponytail, and shoved her head underwater. At first, I figured it was just a moment of rage. Maybe he was only trying to scare her. But seconds passed, and he didn't stop. The girl started struggling to get away, kicking wildly and flailing to break free. Instead of letting go, he pushed her deeper. My hands started shaking so badly I thought I might pass out. I wanted to scream, but I was completely frozen. Her movements grew weaker. The kicking slowed until she finally stopped struggling and went still. The guy remained there for a few more seconds, holding her underwater just to be sure. Then, he slowly stood and looked down at her body floating in the shallow water. Suddenly, he blinked, lifted his head, and our eyes met. He stared at me for a beat before charging straight at me. Panic seized me. I screamed, stumbled backward, and took off toward the party. My heart was hammering, and my legs were burning. I could hear his footsteps behind me on the sand. He was definitely chasing me. I glanced back and saw him sprinting, closing the distance. I ran faster. The bonfire was ahead of me, along with the distant glow of the party and the sound of music. I just had to make it to the lights and the people, but he was getting close. I could practically feel him behind me. I could hear his breathing and the pounding of his footsteps on the sand right at my heels. I didn't dare look back again. I just ran as hard as I could. The party was getting closer, but so was he. I could almost feel his hands reaching for me. Then, just before he could grab me, I burst into the crowd and collapsed, gasping for air. "Dude, what's wrong?" Maverick asked. "Somebody's been killed. Down the beach, a man drowned a woman. He's coming. He's right behind me." Everyone stopped. They looked at me, then toward the darkness I'd come from, but nobody was there. I frantically looked around. The beach behind me was empty, swallowed by darkness. Where did he go? He was right there. I swear, he was chasing me. My friends grabbed flashlights and phones. A group of us ran down the beach to where I'd seen it happen, while others stayed behind and checked the perimeter. We reached the spot, but there was nothing there. "Are you sure this is the right place?" "Yes, right here. I saw it. He drowned her." We searched up and down the beach and called the police. They arrived within an hour with searchlights and dogs. They combed the shoreline and the water for hours, but they found nothing. They took my statement and asked me to describe everything I'd seen. I told them every detail, and they wrote it all down. But I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. The search continued for 2 more days. When they still found nothing, they closed the case. They figured I had been drunk and hallucinating, but I wasn't. I know what I saw was real. He drowned that woman right in front of me, then chased me down the beach. I heard his footsteps and felt his presence right behind me, but he stopped just before I reached the lights, which makes me wonder if he'd chosen not to follow me any farther. Maybe that was what he wanted all along. Maybe he wanted me to survive and remember every detail, so I'd spend the rest of my life jumping at shadows. Maverick's next birthday bash is only 2 months away. He's throwing another huge party on his dad's yacht, but I already told him I'm not going. I can't handle being near the beach without seeing that man's face in my mind. I know he's still out there, probably hunting someone else, and I can't stop replaying that night over and over again. I keep thinking about that woman, wondering if she had a family or friends, people who may never know what happened to her. Jacksonville, Florida was my mom's hometown, and even though she'd moved up to New York with my dad decades ago, we still headed back every summer to kick back and reconnect with our roots. It was the first week of summer break. My 2 best friends, Mark and Lyle, and I were chilling by the waters. The beach was totally packed that day. It was peak tourist season, so there were families, umbrellas, and little kids running around everywhere. We were hanging out by the water when we noticed this middle-aged guy moving frantically through the crowd, practically screaming "Pamela" at the top of his lungs. Everyone was watching him, and people were moving out of his way. "The dude looks like he's about to pass out," Mark said. I agreed. He looked like he was about to cry, and he kept spinning around, checking faces and looking everywhere at the same time. I finally stood up and told the guys I was going to go ask what was up. Mark tagged along. We caught up to him, right by the lifeguard stand. The second he saw us approach, he grabbed my arm and told us his 7-year-old daughter was missing. I was lying on the sand, and I got a call. When I turned around, she was gone. I asked if he had a picture, but he said his phone was dead. He could only give us a description. She has dark brown hair, is wearing a pink swimsuit, and is 7 years old. Her name is Pamela. He begged us to help look while he waited near the security shack in case she came back there. It seemed logical. We split up. Mark went left toward the pier. Lyle went right toward the parking lot, and I walked farther down the shoreline away from all the main crowds. I searched for a while, scanning faces and looking for a little girl in pink. The farther I walked from the crowds, the quieter it got. Soon, families started to thin out, and the noise died down. Suddenly, my eyes fell on a small figure curled into a ball under a palm tree about 30 feet ahead. The girl looked about 7 years old and matched the description, and she was sobbing. Sighing in relief, I walked over, crouched down, and told her I was looking for her and that her dad was waiting at the security shack. She stiffened, still hiccuping. She stared at me in horror and started shaking her head violently.
"My dad is dead."
What? She told me she had come to the beach with her mother that morning when a tall man had approached her while her mother wasn't watching and offered her chocolate. She was lured away from the crowd.
He took me to the cottage and tried doing bad things.
She said she managed to run away and found this spot under the tree. She hasn't moved since because she was too scared and couldn't find her mother. Everything rearranged in my head at once. Disgust churned in my stomach. I was furious, horrified, and disgusted at the same time. I reassured the girl that she was safe with me before I hurriedly grabbed my phone and called Mark. I told him to get Lyle and bring security to the shack immediately. Don't leave that monster alone. God knows whose daughter he'd try and ruin next. The girl had calmed down a bit. I told her we were going to find her mom. She walked at least a few feet away from me and looked ready to bolt. I took her back toward the main crowd and kept scanning for her mother. Suddenly, a commotion broke out somewhere to the left. People were shouting, and a crowd was forming near the security shack. When we got there, 3 security guards had the man pinned on the sand. He was screaming that he only wanted to play with the little girl and that we had misunderstood. A woman burst through the crowd and grabbed Pamela so hard she almost knocked her over. The girl started crying into her shoulder. Her mother was shaking and crying too, and couldn't stop thanking everyone around her. Police arrived and took him away in handcuffs. I gave a statement and told them everything. The officer wrote it all down and said the setup was a usual trick that child predators often used. They'd use other people to bring them the victim, so it would be less suspicious and faster. Hearing that made me feel so sick that I couldn't shake it for weeks. Mark and Lyle met me afterward. We didn't talk much on the drive home. I think all three of us were running the same calculation, how close we came to just handing her over. If she hadn't told me about her dad being dead in time, and if she just said yes when I mentioned the security shack, and if she'd been a little younger or a little more trusting, we would have walked her right back to him. He would have thanked us, and she would have been gone before we even made it back to our towels. It has been nearly half a decade. I still go to the beach in the summer, but I think about that day every time I'm there, and about how ordinary he looked, and how convincing his fear was, and how natural it felt to want to help a desperate father. He used our instinct to do good as a weapon against us. We're raised to be the good guys, to have a heart from childhood. But we've never been taught that the monsters don't just hide in the dark. They use our own empathy to bait the hook. One tiny, well-meaning slip-up, or a moment of eagerly being a good person, and you've handed someone their worst nightmare on a silver platter. Learn to be kind, but don't forget to stay clever at all times.
Please don't open the door. Please don't open the door.
I kept my eyes squeezed shut and promised Jesus I'd be a good guy if he'd spare me. I was trembling. Tears were running down my face. I tried to pull my knees up and make myself as small as possible in the back corner of that hallway closet, but I was still visible, and if he opened the door, he'd see me. I could hear him moving through the house. He was rummaging through the kitchen drawers. I heard him crash Mom's favorite vase about 5 minutes earlier. A few more steps, and he'd be in the hallway. I gripped my toy walkie-talkie so hard my knuckles hurt. Suddenly, those heavy footsteps started coming down the hall. Before I knew it, I could see a silhouette through the crack in the door. It had been about 2 hours since my parents rushed out to the hospital, and maybe an hour since the guy broke in. The night wasn't supposed to go this way. I was about to turn 8 a week later and become a big brother in a month. My parents had been hyping me up for months about it. Dad let me help set up the yellow nursery and even let me decide what we'd call her. I even put Mr. Giraffe in the crib because Dad promised she'd love it. I was really excited to be a big brother. But around 9 that night, Dad burst into my room, saying they had to leave right then and that my sister was coming sooner than expected. Mom was already in the car, and Granny was on the way to be with me, but it'd be 4 hours before she could make it. They told me I'd be totally fine on my own for a few hours. I'd never been home alone before, even for an hour, so I was pretty excited about it too. I told them I'd be fine. Before leaving, Dad handed me my toy walkie-talkie and told me to keep it on Channel 5. The hospital was only 20 minutes away, and they said they'd check in as soon as they could. He stuck the neighbors' number on the fridge with a magnet before they left. The house went dead silent. For a while, I was okay. I made a bowl of cereal, dragged my blanket to the couch, and put on The Simpsons. I was actually starting to feel kind of cool about it, like I was finally old enough to handle things. Around 11, a bad storm rolled in. The wind made loud, scary noises, and thunder shook the windows so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. Lightning kept turning the whole living room bright white. I kept telling myself I wasn't scared. I was a big guy now, and I'd heard thunder a million times before. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went dead. Before I could even find the flashlight, the front window smashed open. Panicking, I ran straight to the hallway where Dad and I always played peekaboo. I yanked the closet door open, scrambled behind the coats, and shut it tight. Through the crack, I watched a shadow creep around. It was so dark I couldn't see his face, but I figured he was tall and carrying a bag. He started tearing through the drawers and cabinets, stuffing everything he found into his bag. Suddenly, his flashlight hit the ceiling, and the blade of his knife caught the light. I scrambled back and curled into a ball, hugging my knees. I figured if I stayed perfectly still and kept quiet, he'd grab whatever he wanted from the living room and leave. I really believed that, for about 5 minutes, until I heard his boots hitting the floorboards in the hall. He started tearing through the hallway drawers too. I could hear the screech of metal every time he pried one open. Out of nowhere, the closet door ripped open. I screamed and bolted, diving between his legs and scrambling into the living room. "Leo," he whispered. I froze and turned around. I saw his flashlight drop again, the beam hitting his face. "Uncle Ray?" I gasped. Mom kept a shoebox full of old photos on the top shelf of her closet. I'd snooped through it once and put it back after looking at the pictures. She never really talked about who everyone was, but she did tell me about her brother, Ray. He ran away when he was 17 because Grandpa wouldn't buy him a bike and never came back. Ever since I found out I was going to be a big brother, she'd been telling me stories about their childhood and how much she missed him. "You know me?" "Mom told me all about you." I nodded. I watched him stiffen for a second before he started reaching for me, but I bolted, wanting to keep as much distance from the blade as possible. Right then, the walkie-talkie in my hand crackled to life, and suddenly, the house was filled with my baby sisters crying. My sister was here. I dropped to the floor and started sobbing. Uncle Ray shuffled his feet before crouching beside me and patting my head. I raised my head and still can't quite explain the look I saw on Uncle Ray's face. He looked at me and at the walkie-talkie before setting the bag down, backing away, and walking right out the front door. I stayed on the floor for ages after he left. Eventually, I got up, wedged a kitchen chair under the front door handle, and sat on the couch, waiting for them. Granny couldn't get to me because of the storm. My parents got home at 3 in the morning. Dad was already showing me pictures on his phone, and Mom was crying happy tears. They noticed the smashed window immediately and called the police. I told them everything. I didn't tell them it was Uncle Ray. I don't know why, honestly. It felt like a secret I had to keep. It's been a while now. My sister's in 2nd grade. Uncle Ray never showed back up, but I still think about his face when he heard her crying. He came there to take something, but he ended up leaving something behind instead. I could see it all through that narrow slit in the door. The screaming streamers that had lost their voices begging for their lives. The fresh blood that covered the floor, and the limbs that had been severed from the ones he'd killed before. This wasn't for content. This wasn't a movie. It was real life, and the day I thought I'd die at TwitchCon. My name is Lena Clark, and on November 13th, 2022, I attended my first TwitchCon. After 2 years of grinding just chatting streams in my bedroom, getting to see all my biggest inspirations in the same place as me really filled me with a sense of ambition and pride. Of course, I wasn't allowed in the same area as my idols, and was instead sat with the smaller up-and-coming streamers, one of which immediately caught my attention and ended up being assigned to the seat next to me. The person was dressed in a full-body white bear suit. It had a slightly oversized head that was tilted to the side, with dark glossy eyes that I believed functioned as his camera, fluffy paws, and the usual streaming backpack. All I could think to myself was,
interesting.
But after a few minutes of the bear sitting completely still and nothing but awkward silence between us, I decided to start a conversation.
Hey, I'm Lena. What's your name?
The suit turned to face me slowly, and a low, muffled voice came from inside. "You can call me Cody."
Pleasure meeting you, Cody. So, tell me, is it obvious it's my first time? I haven't stopped smiling. I think everyone's going to know I'm a newbie.
Not really. It's my first time too.
Oh, wow. So, you've just never been interested, or you're new to streaming?
No, I've been streaming for a while. I've just had my talents elsewhere. My fans begged me to come to Twitch. They said this is where the real target audience is. Despite the fact that something felt off about the man, I smiled politely and continued.
Oh, that's nice. So what kind of content do you make?
Well, people. People are my content. There's nothing really more interesting if you ask me. Before I could ask what that meant, the lights dimmed for the opening keynote, and the whole crowd applauded as the Twitch CEO walked onto the stage. Twitch is for you, for the creators with big dreams that can't afford Hollywood budgets but are born to entertain. This platform is about real connection and giving voices to those who have been shut out but deserve to have their voices heard. Those are the people I created Twitch for, and we exist to celebrate the best content from the best people. Thank you very much. That's all from me. The crowd once again burst into applause and cheers, but beside me, Cody sat completely still before muttering under his breath, "Bullshit. I've only been on this godforsaken site for a short time, but I already see it. They ban anyone for the mildest expression of an opinion that doesn't match theirs. They don't honor real creators, they silence them, just like the rest of the world. But I'm gonna change that, I promise." In that moment, I honestly couldn't tell if Cody had been talking to himself or me, but for some reason, I became suddenly aware of just how big the bear suit was. I ignored his little monologue and tried paying attention to the next person addressing us, but I'd been exhausted from traveling and ended up falling asleep. When I woke, Cody was gone. The seat beside me was empty, and the bear was nowhere in sight. Just then, I looked at my phone and saw a voice message from my friend Mark, who'd been working audio and visuals for the event. "Hey, come to the AV room beside the stage. Got something cool to show you before the next panel." I slipped out of my row and slowly made my way to the room. As I got there, Mark was standing, waiting with a smile. "You're gonna love me for this. I got us passes to the private area. You know, where all the real celebrities are." Excitedly, I ran into the dimly lit room with Mark, but as we stepped in, a piercing scream cut through the wall. We froze, not sure what we'd heard, but then came the next scream that confirmed it. People began shouting, and chaos erupted. Mark rushed to the door that gave us a view of the stage and slowly cracked it open. Although I was terrified to see what was causing those horrified screams, I slowly forced myself forward and peered through the crack beside him. My heart sank, and my stomach churned at the sight of the white bear standing in the middle of the crowd with fresh blood covering its fur. Its paws were now off, and in its manly hands it held a fire axe buried deep in a streamer's skull. The body twitched for a moment before going still. In horror, Mark jammed the door shut and locked it while I hurriedly backed away, hyperventilating and trying not to throw up.
What the fuck is going on, Mark?
I don't know, Lena. I don't. I'm calling 911. While Mark called and spoke to the police, I once again peered through the narrow slit and was met by the horrific sight of Cody as he butchered one person after another. The axe rose and fell efficiently. Blood covered the floor and screams filled the room. The blinking red light from the camera in Cody's eyes reminded me that he'd been streaming the whole thing, and this horrific massacre in its own way was a performance, entertainment for him and his sick fans. Eventually, the screams died down, and everyone who had been attending was either long gone or dead, with the only exception being the bear. He stood still and looked around, almost like he was taking it in and getting the best angles. After that, he turned to the AV room, and my heart sank even further as he slowly made his way over towards the room, almost like he knew we'd been there all along. The big black eyes stared directly into mine, and in a monotone voice, almost like he'd been talking to Chat, he spoke. "Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the stream. Don't forget to gift and subscribe. See you later." I was wiping the register when I heard the loud screech of tires, followed by a crash so loud I actually felt it in my chest. It was a couple of minutes past 2 in the morning, and it was totally dead outside. I could still hear the loud hum of the engine. I bolted from behind the counter, ran out the front door, and stopped cold. A black sedan was wrapped around a tree about 40 feet off the highway. The front end was completely crushed. The driver's door was hanging open, and this guy was stumbling out with one hand over his forehead, blood leaking through his fingers. He was shouting for help. I ran over, thinking I was doing the right thing. I really wish I'd known then how badly I was messing up. But I was 22, still figuring out how to be an adult and working the overnight shift at a gas station off Route 9 in rural Virginia. It was my first night shift job ever. Before this, I'd worked day shifts at Target and a couple of coffee shops. I'd been at the station for about 8 months and was constantly questioning why I hadn't done that before. Most nights, I rarely had any customers, except for the occasional trucker stopping by for coffee and chips. It was quiet enough that I could use the time to work on my novel. By midnight, the highway was usually dead. Well, except for that one time when the sedan crashed. I ran across the gravel to the car. The man grabbed my arm the second I reached him. He was shaking and his eyes were unfocused.
Please, call 911.
I told him we needed to get away from the car, that I'd get him seated and help. But he kept repeating it, desperate, like he was scared someone would jump from the car and get him at any minute. Skeptical, I looked over my shoulder and saw the woman in the passenger seat. She wasn't moving. Her face was covered in blood, with glass in her hair and down her shirt. I told him to come inside so we could call 911 while I went to get his wife. I got him onto a stool behind the counter and found the first aid kit. I handed him an ice pack and had only turned to get his wife, but his shaking hands clamped around my wrists, stopping me. He shook his head frantically, opening and closing his mouth as if he couldn't decide what to say. Suddenly, the front door swung open and the woman limped in. Glass was embedded in her cheek and her shirt was soaked with blood. Her eyes were wide with alertness and she looked furious. She stared at her husband and started screaming, calling him every name in the book.
So she's the one, huh?
She accused him of flirting with me while she was bleeding to death. The guy tried to calm her down, but she only got more furious. She started hurling gum packs and cigarette boxes from the register.
You fucking swine! I'll show you and this sidekick of yours.
She called me a homewrecker, insisting she knew exactly what I'd been doing. I tried to tell her she had the wrong idea, that I was just trying to help. But she crossed the store in 4 steps and slapped me hard across the face before she yanked my hair.
Ma'am, you're taking this all wrong!
She shut me up with another slap. I tried to pull away, but her grip was too tight. Tears stung my eyes. Behind her, the guy was shouting at her to stop, but she wasn't listening. Suddenly, he reached into the cooler, grabbed a beer bottle, and smashed it across the back of her head. She dropped to the floor and didn't move. He was breathing hard, looking at me like he was drowning.
I'm sorry. Every second of our 20 years of marriage has been hell. She'd been screaming at me the whole drive. I lost control. Please, you have to help me. My life is ruined. I can't take it anymore.
My face was still throbbing where she'd slapped me. I was shaken, embarrassed, and honestly pissed off. She'd called me a homewrecker when I was just trying to help. So when he asked me to back him up and say it was all from the crash, I didn't push back. In the moment, it felt like justice. 20 minutes later, the cops arrived. We told them our story and they bought it. They had no reason not to. 4 days later, I saw them on the news. She died at the hospital from a brain bleed. I turned the TV off and sat there. For a few days, I told myself she was the crazy one and he was the victim, and I'd helped him like a good Samaritan. But the unease wouldn't go away. I started thinking about the timeline. She had been unconscious in that car. I was certain of it. But minutes later, she walked into the store and her anger was laser focused on her husband. She wasn't acting like someone dazed from a car wreck. She was acting like someone who knew exactly what she wanted to say. What had they been fighting about on that drive? What did she find out? And was a car going that fast on a straight, empty highway really just a loss of control? I don't know. I might never know. but I do know that I stood in a police station and lied for a guy who'd killed his wife in front of me without ever giving her the benefit of the doubt. She could have been right, and now she's dead. Those two facts stare me in the face, and they don't go anywhere, no matter the number of jobs I switch. It was 9:30 p.m. on the 4th of July. Outside, the sky was lit up with fireworks, and you could feel the vibrations of crowds cheering in the distance. Mark and I were having dinner, trying to enjoy a relaxed night after the wreck our lives had been through. Suddenly, a loud knock rattled the doorframe. My husband froze. The blood drained from his face, and sweat started trickling down his forehead, as if he already knew exactly who was standing on the other side and what they were capable of. "Could it be at this hour?" he whispered, staring at the door like he was afraid it might burst open. Mark and I had been married for 9 years. We met at work through a mutual colleague and got married in his hometown after about 3 years of dating. Life had us moving around a lot, and between the constant changes and settling into new places, the spark had slowly faded. I discovered his affair accidentally while going through his phone about 6 years ago. It turned out she was a junior colleague, and the affair had been going on for about 4 months. It crushed me so badly that I didn't even want to look at her photo or know her name. We spent 3 weeks barely speaking and sleeping in separate rooms. I wanted to end the marriage, but Mark begged me for another chance. He promised it was over and swore he'd been a fool and would never make the same mistake again. Eventually, our families got involved, and even our therapist suggested we take some time to make a clear-headed decision. The 4th of July was fast approaching. Both of us wanted to get out of the city, away from everyone who knew us, and have an honest conversation. Mark had ended things with her the week before. He told me she'd accepted it and that it wouldn't be an issue. The cabin was my idea. We'd driven 3 hours into the mountains, renting one tucked away off a dirt road where you couldn't see another soul. Fireworks were popping off in the valley below, sending little bursts of color through the trees. We'd had dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and were actually having the kind of honest conversation we hadn't managed in months. "Look, there's no one else to blame but me. I'm a married man, and it was just stupid and cruel. I know what I did was unforgivable. I love you, Jen. I promise." A knock at the door interrupted him and made him freeze. All the color drained from his face, and he went completely still.
Who is that?
I asked. He didn't answer. He stood up and headed for the door. The woman standing on the porch was maybe 5 years younger than us. Her dark hair was tucked into a messy bun, and she was wearing a light jacket that didn't stand a chance against the mountain chill. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her face was pulled tight with anger. "Alyssa." Mark sounded horrified. Before I could blink, she stepped forward and cracked him across the face.
You fucking swine! You told me you loved me!
She screamed. I tried to step in, but Mark pushed past me onto the porch, trying to steer her away from the doorway. He was attempting to stay calm, throwing out apologies that only seemed to fuel her rage. The woman was hysterical, shrieking over him and shouting that he'd only ended things because I'd manipulated him.
I know you want me! It's that bitch! She has stolen you away! She got between us! But I know how to remove her.
Suddenly, her hand shot out and grabbed the large kitchen knife we'd left on the porch table after lunch. Mark scrambled after her, but she lunged past him and charged straight at me. I twisted out of the way just in time, but she still caught my arm. The cut felt like a searing burn, but it was enough to send a jolt of panic through me. Before she could reach me again, I grabbed the nearest wooden chair and shoved it between us. She swung twice, hacking at the air, but I kept backing away, putting furniture between us as I desperately tried to get my phone. Mark lunged at her from behind, but she spun and jammed the knife into his side. He let out a raw, guttural sound I'd never heard before and slumped against the wall. Even as he went down, he was still gripping her wrist, refusing to let her go. She fought to break free, screaming about betrayal. Without thinking, I grabbed the chair and swung, hitting the back of her head as hard as I could, and she went down. I pinned her arms beneath me and dialed 911 with my free hand, screaming at Mark to stay with me. The operator stayed on the line, talking to me while I held Alyssa down with my knee across her arms and watched Mark struggle to breathe from across the room. She assured me help was coming and asked me to keep talking. The police arrived 20 minutes later. It might as well have been an eternity. The woman was taken away in handcuffs. She was still screaming. Mark was airlifted to a hospital in the valley. The knife had missed anything vital by about 2 inches. He was home 6 days later. The night before he was discharged, we watched fireworks from the hospital parking lot, sitting on the hood of my car with a blanket draped around his shoulders. It wasn't the 4th of July we'd planned, but he was alive. I don't know what our marriage is now. It's not what it was before, and it's not what it was during those 3 weeks when I thought it was over. We're still figuring it out. But he grabbed her wrist after she stabbed him. He held on, trying to keep her away from me because he was afraid of losing me. I know nothing can undo what he did, but those actions have to mean something. I'm just not sure what yet. I graduated from Oregon State University in June with a degree in environmental science. I loved exploring in the woods, so when my roommate told me about this hiking trail, I decided to go. I drove up to the woods north of Tillamook on a Friday afternoon and pulled into a trailhead lot that only had a couple of other cars. I'd packed light since I was only staying one night. The trail was easy to follow for the first few hours before it started getting kinda sketchy. Around 4:30, I hit a bad patch of loose gravel on a ridge descent and went down hard. I tumbled about 15 feet before a tree root stopped my slide. When I tried sitting up, my right ankle hurt so bad that I screamed. To top it off, my phone screen was spiderweb from the fall. It still turned on, but the touchscreen was basically useless. I sat there for probably 10 minutes, thinking through my options. I was at least 2 hours from the trailhead on a good ankle, and the temperature was already dropping. Staying put overnight alone with an injury in those woods was a bad idea. I grabbed a branch big enough to use as a crutch and started hobbling along. About an hour in, I caught a whiff of wood smoke. I followed the scent and stumbled upon this tiny rundown cabin that looked like the forest was trying to swallow it. It was tucked between massive trees on all sides, but I could see a light flickering in the window. Figuring it might be a private rental for hikers or maybe an old, unmaintained ranger cabin, I knocked, hoping whoever was inside could help me. An elderly Asian woman who looked to be in her late 60s answered. She was wearing a chunky gray cardigan with some flour dusted on the sleeves. Her silver hair was pulled back in a loose tie.
Hi, I'm Liz Harper.
I explained how I'd come out to the woods for a little break, but ended up having a nasty accident. She told me her name was May and said I was more than welcome to stay for a bit. I thanked her and stepped inside. The cabin was tiny and felt pretty dated. She had me sit down in the only chair in the room so she could take a look at my ankle. She went over to a shelf full of clay jars and started mixing a few things. It turned into a dark greenish paste that smelled like pine needles. She packed it around my ankle and wrapped it with some strips of cloth. Within minutes, the injury had healed.
Holy cow! What is that stuff?
Just some medicine I make. You want some tea?
I nodded. While May got the tea going, we chatted. She told me she'd been living out here off the grid for over 20 years, making herbal cures and growing all her own food.
My son's been really sick for a while now. I'm doing everything in my power to pull him through.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. Would you like to meet him?
I agreed. She took me to the back of the cabin, where a guy in his early 20s was lying on a bed that looked way too small for him. To me, he actually seemed pretty healthy. May kept talking about his illness, but I could barely focus on what she was saying. The guy looked really, really familiar. I racked my brain and suddenly recognized him from the missing persons flyer stapled to a pole right outside the coffee shop in Corvallis where I worked.
How
long did you say he had been sick? Since he was born. Excuse me, I need to start preparing his meals now.
I waited until May was back in the kitchen before I started shaking him awake. He came to slowly, totally spaced out, but the second he realized I was there, he lunged and grabbed my wrist. He'd rasped out that she had drugged him and brought him here. He'd been trapped there for weeks, and every time he felt strong enough to try and bolt, she'd hit him with some medicine that totally wiped him out. We need to leave. Before we even had a chance to make a break for it, I heard May's footsteps thumping down the hallway. A second later, she was standing in the doorway. She still had that smile on her face, but her eyes had turned dead and ice cold.
I made you kids some dinner. Come eat.
The guy managed to get up, but he was incredibly shaky. I hooked my arm under him to prop him up and told May that we were leaving. She kept staring. I noticed her fingers fumbling with a little packet, like she was about to throw something at us. Before she could do anything, I swung my crutch with everything I had. It clipped her hard on the shoulder, sending her stumbling into the doorframe. We shoved past her and scrambled out the front door into the night. As we ran, I could hear her crying out behind us. She was wailing about being abandoned, but we didn't stop until we reached a ranger station. Nathan spilled everything. He said she'd picked him up hitchhiking and kept him for months. The ranger called for an ambulance and the cops right away. By the next afternoon, officers were already on their way to the cabin. But by the time they made it, she had fled. Nathan spent 2 days in the hospital before his family drove up from Portland. His toxicology report cited a plant-derived sedative that they couldn't even identify. If I hadn't showed up and recognized him when I did, he'd have eventually started to fade. The cops are still trying to track her down, but I seriously doubt she'll turn up anytime soon. She's way too clever and determined for that. She was on a mission, and if Nathan couldn't deliver, she'd probably already be out there, looking for the next person who could. The Brimshire Motel had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather had bought the motel from a friend in 1953, and he'd passed it down to my father after he retired. My father would always tell me that I would one day own the motel, and I can never forget the day he held me in his arms and said, "Listen closely, Richard. Your grandfather poured his blood and sweat into this motel to provide for our family. It hasn't been doing well over the years, but I promised your grandfather no matter what happened, I wouldn't lose the motel. It's all going to be yours one day, and I need you to promise me that you will do everything you can to carry on the family business." I began running the motel after my father turned 70. It wasn't easy owning an old motel, as most guests preferred to choose more modern options with better services. However, I was determined to keep my promise to my father, so I did everything I could to make sure our motel could compete by offering cheap rooms and decent services to our guests. Everything was running smoothly at first, but that all changed after I noticed a strange man had started hanging around our motel. The man had a disturbing look on his face, and he was always looking at me like I'd owed him something. I'd never met the man before, and I wondered who he could be or why he was monitoring our motel. I didn't think much of it at first, but it wasn't before long things took a turn for the worse as the deranged man began to follow me. I was terrified now, as I could often see him stalking me out of the corner of my eye as soon as I arrived at the motel. I went to the authorities, but they weren't able to identify or track down the man I believed was stalking me at the motel. For some bizarre reason, my stalker had somehow managed to expertly elude the authorities, as he always seemed to appear whenever there was no one else around. I tried my best to keep my distance, as I could tell he was dangerous and I wanted to avoid a confrontation. However, despite all my efforts to avoid this man, he somehow found a way to approach me when I was all alone. His eyes were bloodshot red, and he looked disheveled as he said, "Where is he? I know you have him. I've been watching you, and I know you're hiding him in this motel." Even though I was frightened, I managed to keep my calm.
I really think you're mistaking me for someone else. And if you don't leave right now, I'm going to call the police."
The man reached for his pocket, but luckily before he could do anything, the motel security rushed to help, and he ran away, disappearing into the darkness. I thanked them for their help, and I asked them to be on the lookout for him. I also started carrying my gun, as after meeting my stalker, I assumed he was a mentally unstable man who was mistaking me for someone else. The following night, I was wrapping up a few things in my office when my window was shattered by a large rock. Within seconds, the man was standing in my office, but I was prepared this time, so I took out my gun and said,
"You have 5 seconds to leave before I shoot you or call the police."
The man, who now had tears in his eyes, looked at me.
"Please, lower your weapon. I just want to talk. I know I've been acting crazy, following you around all this time, but I'm just looking for my son. We didn't have a good relationship, and we didn't talk much, but he recently reached out and said he was staying at the Brimshire Motel. That was the last text I heard from him before he disappeared, and I thought you did something to him, so I followed you, trying to find out." "As I said before, sir, you have the wrong person. I didn't do anything to your son."
The man then broke down in tears.
"I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't go to the police because he didn't have his papers, so I had to look for him myself. I'm losing my mind, and I'm scared something has happened to him."
I felt pity for the man, so I lowered my weapon and calmed him down. I then gave him some tea and told him that I'd do everything I could to help locate his missing son. He began to thank me before he suddenly collapsed and fell to the floor. The sedative had finally kicked in, so I called in the motel security and asked them to put him with the others. I didn't exactly enjoy getting my hands dirty, but I knew this was what had to be done, as my father had told me this was the only way to keep the family business alive. Our motel was essentially a money pit. My father knew we couldn't afford to keep running the motel for much longer and that we would eventually have to shut it down, but my father struck a deal with the cartel to avoid that. He realized that an old motel like ours was the best place to find rejects, particularly people who didn't have any family and wouldn't be missed if they disappeared. You simply offer them an incredibly cheap room and wait for them to take the bait. They are then drugged and shipped off to the cartel to be used as mules. The cartel pays us well for this important service, and we use that money to keep the motel running while also offering the cheapest motel rooms on the market. I have no remorse for my actions, as I know I'm only doing what's necessary to keep the lights on at the Brimshire Motel. I've always hated my mother with a burning passion. I know this is a horrible thing to say about your own mother, but from the moment I was born, my mother has always been a terrible monster. She always used to look at me with disgust in her eyes for as long as I can remember, and she went out of her way to make my childhood a living hell. I never understood why my own mother hated me so much. And it wasn't until I was a little older that my grandmother explained the reasons behind my mother's hatred, as it all began before I was even born. My father's name was Nathaniel Green, and he was a soldier who died during active service just a couple of months after marrying my mother. She was pregnant with twins at the time of his death, and the doctor told my mother that she was expecting a boy and a girl. My grandmother told me that our mother named us Marcus and Amelia, but she could tell she was more excited for Marcus to be born, as she believed he was all she had left of her late husband. Unfortunately, at the time of our birth, I was the only twin to survive. The doctors described it as an exceptionally rare and atypical case of fetus in fetu. My brother's spine and partially formed bones were discovered in my abdomen, and they had to be surgically removed before they could cause serious complications. My mother, who needed a son to remind her of her dead husband, despised me for eating my brother Marcus and constantly berated me for something I had no control over. She would often say things like,
"You shouldn't have been the one to survive.
Why couldn't have been my boy Marcus? He was all I had. But you wanted to hurt me. So you consumed your own brother, you greedy demon!
I can't even repeat some of the more disturbing things she said throughout my hellish childhood, as I would often cry myself to sleep as her words always cut so deep. I often spent most of my time with my grandmother whenever my mother couldn't stand the sight of me. No matter how many years passed, her hatred toward me never went away. So immediately after high school, I went to college, and I never came back. I didn't speak to my mother again until I was 27. I'd gotten a call from her nursing home, telling me that she'd fallen ill and was asking to see me. I ignored their initial call, as I didn't want anything to do with her. However, the nursing home kept calling back, saying that she hadn't been feeling too well lately, and despite our bad relationship, they were urging me to visit her before it was too late. I wondered why she wanted to see me after all these years, and I couldn't even imagine what she would say. I mulled over the decision for some time, and, against my better judgment, I went to see her. I arrived at the nursing home at around 9:30 p.m. that night. After I walked into her room, I saw my mother sitting next to the window. A few seconds of silence passed before she slowly turned her head and said,
Is that you, Amelia? I didn't think you'd come.
I didn't think I was going to come either. And to be honest with you, I'm still wondering why I'm even standing here, next to the woman who made my life a living hell.
I made a lot of mistakes. And during these past few months, I've realized that there's one last thing that I must do. You must have gone senile in this nursing home. If you think an apology is going to cut it after all these years, you're mistaken. Nevertheless, I'm still willing to hear it. Your apology isn't really going to change anything, or fix the horrors you put me through. But I'm going to be the bigger person and accept it. Because even if you were a monster, you're still my mother. And I forgive you.
The room was dimly lit, and I couldn't really see my mother's face, but I could hear her whisper the words,
Come closer.
So I stepped toward her. As I stood in front of my mother, I now noticed the sinister grin she had on her face. Before I could even say anything, she took out a jagged knife and pierced it through my abdomen. I can't even begin to explain the feelings I felt as my mother cut me open with a knife while she screamed.
Where is Marcus? Where is Marcus, you evil child? I have to cut him out of you. I have to save him. Why did you have to eat him? Don't you understand he was all I had left? Give him back. Give him back to me. I curse the day I birthed you. And I'll rip my son out of your bloody corpse, even if it's the last thing that I do.
I was losing a lot of blood, but I managed to violently push her off me during the struggle. She fell in an unnatural position and snapped her neck right in front of me. The other residents of the nursing home who heard the commotion called an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital. Even to this day, I can still recall the look of pity on the officer's face as he took my statement after my surgery. There isn't a day that goes by when I don't regret my decision to go back to that nursing home to see my mother. Despite the years of therapy and my attempts to move on, I couldn't just accept the fact that the very last memory I shared with my own mother was a gruesome scene where she was trying to kill me because I'd eaten a son who never even existed. An hour or so later, the man showed up beside me with a friendly smile and a hand on my shoulder. He started chatting with me about random stuff, and I played along until he said, "People do stupid things when they think no one's watching." My mouth dried up, and my eyes instantly drifted towards Skylar, who was standing in a corner, looking as pale as a ghost. I opened my mouth to maybe explain, but he beat me to it. "Want to follow me for a sec, Asher? I want to show you something." He squeezed my shoulder. I instantly regretted saying yes to my friend Carter, That week, I was already vacationing in Pensacola, Florida, when Carter suggested a reunion with some old classmates. Around 20 people showed up at a rented beach house, and by nightfall, everyone was drinking around the bonfire like no time had passed. Among them were Grayson and Skylar, a younger blonde couple who acted inseparable all night. They laughed constantly, whispered to each other, and practically glued themselves together. Even strangers at the party were obsessed with them. Later, after the bonfire died down, Skylar found me alone near the water. While talking about her tech startup, she slowly started flirting, hanging on to every word I said.
You are seriously the funniest guy I've ever met, Asher.
She giggled as she leaned in.
What do you say? Want to go explore the quieter side of the beach?
I should have said no. She was with another guy who was only a few feet away, but Skylar was hot and I was way too drunk for all that moral garbage. We slipped behind a cluster of rocks, away from the music and the noise, and I made a mistake I'm not proud of. Afterward, Skylar was super casual about it. She said Grayson wouldn't even care, and that they had an understanding. I shrugged and told myself it was just a one-time fling. Getting ourselves together, we walked back separately, and I spent the rest of the night avoiding Grayson's eyes, even though he seemed totally oblivious, laughing with a group by the coolers. So, when Grayson pulled me aside and said those creepy things, I was caught like a fish out of water. I nodded and quietly followed him toward the quieter side of the water. Once away from the crowd, Grayson reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and pressed play. In seconds, my grunts and swears echoed in the air. The clip was only 10 seconds, but it was enough to completely wreck my life. Where did you get that? I was terrified. Seriously? You thought you could mess around with my girl and she wouldn't spill? I saw the whole thing, man. I was right there. The air left my lungs and heartbeat picked up. Don't stress. I'm not sending it to anyone. As long as you cooperate. He laid it out clearly. I had to Venmo him a few $100 whenever he asked, or he'd send the video clip to literally everyone I know. The amount wouldn't totally wipe me out, but it was enough to keep me constantly stressed and broke.
Play nice, and we'll make sure no one in your...
No, I'm not sending you a dime. I decided. You can do whatever you want with that, but I'm not letting you mess with me like that. Besides, your face is just as visible as mine, so go ahead, plaster it all over the internet. Their smug looks vanished in a second, replaced by pure rage. Before I could even react, Skylar nailed me with a knee to the groin, and Grayson punched me in the face. I went down, splashing into the water, but they weren't finished. The girl started yanking my hair so hard I thought it was going to rip out, while the guy kept hitting my face and kicking my gut. My mouth was bleeding, and my vision was swimming with white spots. It hurt like a mother. I tried yelling for help and getting away, but the music was blasting, and it was 2-on-1. I cried, begging for them to stop, but they kept knocking me up. All of a sudden, Grayson grabbed my collar, hauled me up, and shoved his face right next to mine. Last chance. Pay up or we'll drown you right here and claim you were trying to assault my girl. You've no idea how badly stupid fellows like you have paid up before. This wasn't their first rodeo, and I sure as hell wasn't their first victim. They'd pulled this crap before, and if I didn't do something right then, I was either going to end up dead or screwed for the rest of my life. I dug deep, found whatever strength I had left, and straight up headbutted the guy in the face the hardest I could. He groaned and staggered back. I broke loose and bolted for the house, screaming for help. Clara saw me before they could grab me again. More guys started showing up. Somebody called 911. The beach patrol showed up in minutes and detained the three of us. Turned out I was one in a line. The department had complaints from multiple people in different locations with the same pattern. The girl would make contact while the guy films. They'd later use it to blackmail guys with homes and reputations and extort money. Most were too scared or ashamed to come forward. My statement was the piece they needed. They arrested both of them right away. The footage of me was seized as evidence. It never went anywhere. but I still think about the bonfire and about how normal it all felt. How I stood there in the glow of it, surrounded by old friends and feeling like the night was exactly what it was supposed to be. I never once suspected that two people on the other side of the flames were targeting me with a plan. And that's the part that keeps me up. How long was I already inside it before I even knew the game had started? And who else is playing it right now? I was still half asleep in bed at 7 when my phone buzzed with a Snapchat notification. I grabbed it, hoping for a cute text from the guy in my econ class, or maybe a meme from Becca or Jade. Instead, a video popped up. It was only 15 seconds long, filmed in the dark, with the camera slowly panning across the room. Dread crawled up as I watched. My throat tightened with each passing second, and heart started racing. I recognized the curtains, the ring light on the table, and that aesthetic poster pulled off from Pinterest immediately. I held my breath while the camera panned slowly to the figure sitting on the bed. A painted red toe came into frame first, followed by some blonde curls, and finally, the face. I shrieked, fumbling and dropping the phone on the duvet as I jolted upright. It was me. Someone had been inside my apartment while I was asleep and filmed me. I'd been at Caldwell for about a year. Being a junior on financial aid meant my life was grinding through my accounting degree and working 2 campus jobs. I lived in a 3rd-floor studio with a keypad lock on campus, and until 2 weeks ago, my biggest stress was to maintain my grades so I could uphold the scholarship and making sure my assignments were in on time. The first snap came on a weekend at 7:05 p.m. I was stuck in a massive study session, trying to fix a balance sheet error. Suddenly, my phone chimed with a Snapchat notification. I picked it up. It was a snap from a throwaway account called Your Reflection. I opened it and froze. It was a photo of me, taken from the foot of my bed at 2 a.m. I tried to reply, but there was nothing except for a default Bitmoji. I asked the person who it was, but didn't get any reply. I tried getting more details about the account, but it only had a Bitmoji and nothing else. I panicked, thinking maybe a creep had broken in or something, and hurriedly rang the building management. By the time they arrived, I changed my keypad code and checked every window, but all of them were already bolted. I told them I received a snap somebody had taken from within my room. They checked the building's CCTV, but it didn't seem like anyone had entered. I tried to convince myself it was just a sick prank by a friend, maybe Jade. She had a YouTube channel where she posted stupid prank videos once in a while, so I called her.
You kidding? Why would I ever do something so silly? I'm sorry. I just thought maybe you'd want content or something. You serious? Babe, my pranks are always harmless. I swear it's not me.
I wanted to believe her. Midterms were fast approaching, and I'd almost forgotten about them. But on a Wednesday evening while I was studying, 7:05 p.m. hit again, and another snap ping in. This time, it was me in the bathtub. My hands started shaking. I called campus police right away, and they didn't find a thing when they searched the place. Since the snap was a one-time view, I had zero proof to show them. One of the officers even had the nerve to ask if I was on something. I told him that was completely insane. Over lunch, I vented to Becca and Jade. Becca was clearly worried, but Jade just tilted her head and asked if I'd been under a lot of stress.
What do you mean? It happens to me all the time during finals. I lose track of whether I've eaten or showered. You've been stressed about midterms because of your scholarship, so maybe...
I told her I was prepared, and, while worried, I knew I'd keep my grades up. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't buy it. The third snap arrived the next night at the exact same time. This time, it showed me at my desk at 2:47 a.m. By the fourth snap, I was barely sleeping. I put tape over my laptop camera, bought a doorstop alarm, and started sleeping with the lights on. It didn't matter though. The fifth one came anyway. After that, I didn't waste a second ordering a hidden camera from Amazon. I set it up on my bookshelf, aiming it right at my bed. I didn't tell anyone about it. I spent 3 days watching the footage, but there was nothing. By the 4th morning, I was so exhausted, I barely wanted to check the footage, but I did it anyway. I scrolled through hours of me sleeping peacefully. I was about to shut it off when the video shifted. At 3:12 a.m., I sat up, moving with a jarring stiffness. I didn't look confused. I stumbled to my desk and pulled my old spare phone out of the corner drawer. I shoved it into a pile of books at a weird tilted angle. I fumbled around with the screen, hitting record before I sent the clip. I walked back, collapsed onto the bed, and passed out again. My eyes were open the whole time, but my face was completely blank. I rewatched the clip a dozen times, hoping I'd see something that proved it wasn't me, but the clip didn't change. I called Dr. Okafor the next day. Jade had mentioned him a while back. It took several weeks of sessions and tests before he could confirm it was a dissociative episode caused by extreme academic stress. He said it's more common than people think and totally manageable. We've been working on it for about 4 months. I'm better at spotting the triggers now, and my sleep schedule is rigid. I haven't gotten a snap from your reflection in 6 weeks. But I still keep that camera on the bookshelf, because the worst part wasn't the creepy messages. It was realizing that while I was dead asleep, my body was up and moving around as if I were there, but there was nobody home behind my eyes. I sat frozen in my chair at home, sick with fear and disgust, watching his blood drip across the desktop in high definition, while chunks of skull and brain matter protruded from the gaping hole in his head. The chat was moving faster than I'd ever seen it, and while I knew he would do whatever it took to entertain, I never imagined he could have taken it this far. Someone was dead. My name is Steve Jonas, and before I left college in 2021, I grew up in one of those towns where everybody knew everyone, and the most interesting thing you could do as someone my age was go fishing. This was one of the many reasons I was so excited to get out and forget about everyone from the town as soon as I gained admission. In late 2022, however, word got around that my friend from back home, Daryl Collins, had started streaming on Twitch. And while I usually wouldn't have cared, Daryl had always been the type of guy who knew how to make heads turn. Back in high school, he was always pulling off the craziest stunts and pranks, and I think deep down, everyone knew he was too big for our small town, and it was only a matter of time before he did something like this. I decided to reach out and show my support. Hey man, heard you're getting into streaming? Pretty big move. I'm sure people back home are losing their minds. Yeah, man, you know how it is. We have the haters, but I don't really care. I feel like I was born for this. Honestly, man, you are. I'll be supporting. In June 2023, Daryl announced he'd be hosting a month-long subathon on his channel. That's 1 month constantly streaming without turning off the camera even for a second. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the fucking channel. I hope everyone's good. Now, chat, as you could already tell from the stream title, I'll be hosting a 1-month subathon. That pure, unfiltered, uncut entertainment for 1 whole month. Let's make some noise. He paused, hitting the soundboard with a smile before continuing. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Just another subathon. We've seen it a million times on a million channels. Blah, blah, blah. But no, guys, this one comes with a twist. I've put something together to really keep you guys engaged for the month. And while I won't tell you what it is, you guys can feel free to figure it out. All through the stream, there'll be little Easter eggs here and there for y'all. And if anyone can type out what it is in the chat before it's revealed, I promise $100 and I'll quit streaming. Yes, chat, that's how sure I am that this will blow your minds away. The subathon hadn't even started, and I already knew Daryl was about to get what he wanted. I watched his announcement that morning and wished him the best before leaving for class. While I didn't have the time to keep up the entire month, I tuned in from time to time to see people's theories about his progress. And sure enough, his stunt had gained a little traction. One night at around 11 p.m., I decided to tune in before going to bed. and although Daryl was already asleep on stream, I noticed something pretty unusual. A lot of people in the chat seemed to be anticipating something, with comments like, "It's time, guys, I'm telling you, it's a clue. Happens every night, it has to mean something. Pay attention to the window." The comments piqued my curiosity, and I stayed up to see what they had been talking about. And at around 1:30 a.m., I saw it. A shadowy figure that looked like a man made his way towards a window, stood eerily still, and watched Daryl sleep for about 30 minutes before leaving. The chat went crazy during this segment, wondering what it could mean or what the plan was with the strange man. I tuned in again the next morning, and it seemed the chat had presented their theories to Daryl about his big mystery, and a lot of them brought up the eerie man from the previous night. Daryl didn't have much to say about that, though, and ended up dismissing it pretty quickly. "Chat, I don't know what y'all are talking about, but there's no man watching me in my sleep. That'd just be creepy and weird. Do better next time." Knowing Daryl, it was obvious he was lying, but even I was pretty excited for the big reveal that was going to happen in 3 days. I tuned in the night before the final day, however eager to see the resolution of the creepy guy at the window, and sure enough, he appeared. This time, however, he was doing more than standing still, and I excitedly watched as he opened Daryl's bedroom window, climbed into the room, and stood over his bed. The man lunged onto Daryl, who'd now woken up in fear, or at least what he wanted to think was fear. And after they struggled for a bit, the man pinned Daryl to the ground, pulled out 2 zip ties, restraining his arms and legs, and then proceeded to position him upright in his gaming chair. The stream wasn't supposed to end for another day, but everyone awake could tell that this was the big finale.
Hey man, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck is this? Why, it's your big mystery, Daryl. Don't you see that? What? Hey guys, if you're watching this, please call the cops. I don't know this man. This isn't the mystery. This is real. Yes, guys, call the cops. Call the cops if you think this is real, chat.
The man let out a sinister laugh before rolling Daryl closer to the camera. At this point, Daryl's face and neck were the only things in view, and as tears began to form in his eyes, my concern grew slowly. I hesitantly reached for my phone to dial 911 as Daryl's pleas got louder.
Please don't do this, man. Please, please. Someone help.
911, how can I help?
I dropped my phone in shock as a deafening bang came through my speakers. Blood exploded all over the camera, and Daryl's head jerked back and forth. Shards of bone and pieces of his brain stuck out from the side of his head, and for a horrifying second, his eyes stayed wide and empty. Then I watched as his head tilted slowly to the side and blood poured from it. After this, I could hear footsteps, and just as the man began to move the body, the screen cut to black and read, "This channel is temporarily unavailable." Emma and I were standing by the shore, dipping our feet into the ocean and laughing about something, when a creepy middle-aged man snuck up behind me and slid his hand onto my hip. I jumped and spun around. He smiled at me and said something about helping me stay steady. I pulled away immediately and told him I was fine. He didn't back off. Instead, he stayed close and kept talking. Then, his hand moved to my lower back. I stepped away again, uncomfortable, and looked around for help. Suddenly, he leaned in and whispered, "Stop pretending you don't want this. Let me take care of you. I'll make you feel things no boy ever could." A shiver of disgust and fear ran down my spine. That was the moment I felt I should have stayed home. I was staying at my cousin Emma's place in Malibu the summer everything happened. Emma and I were practically the same age, and since we shared the same friend group, we spent most weekends together. So when one of her friends invited everyone to a late-night beach party, I went without thinking twice. It wasn't some huge party, maybe 30 people total. Most were drinking, dancing near the bonfire, or sitting in the sand, talking while waves crashed somewhere in the darkness beyond us. It had to have been after midnight, and the beach was almost completely black, except for the fire and a few phone flashlights. That's when I noticed the older man standing near the edge of the group. He looked close to 60, with gray hair, a stomach hanging over his shorts, and an awkward smile that never seemed natural. At first, I assumed he was somebody's dad picking up one of the guests, but he never approached anyone directly. He just lingered nearby, forcing himself into conversations and laughing way too hard at things nobody else found funny. He followed Daisy and Monica when they walked off together and asked overly personal questions about where they were from and what their majors were. The questions themselves weren't necessarily inappropriate, but the way he asked them was unsettling. I elbowed Emma. She glanced at him once and brushed it off.
He's probably some loony weirdo trying to hang out. Chill.
So I did. At least, I tried to. Then, I started noticing him everywhere I went. He was trying to play it cool, but I definitely picked up on the vibe. When I was at the drink table, he was only a few feet away. When I went to find Jacob and ask about his weekend plans, the guy was hanging around nearby. When I sat with Emma and the rest of our friends, he somehow managed to drift into our circle. It started freaking me out, so I stayed close to my friends. I had no idea that a few moments later, this creepy weirdo was going to make such a vile offer. When he told me he wanted me for the night, I didn't know how to react at first. Then, anger took over. He was smiling, assuming I wouldn't make a scene, assuming I'd laugh it off, stay polite, and let it go. I didn't. I shoved him away.
Get away from me!
People nearby turned to look. The music was still playing, but conversations stopped and attention shifted towards us. He tried to laugh it off. I was just joking. His hands were raised, as if he were completely innocent.
No, you didn't! You just grabbed me and said you'd take care of me. Get away!
More and more people started gathering around. He glanced around and realized everyone was staring at him. For the first time all night, he looked nervous. Come on, I didn't mean it like that. Don't be so sensitive. Sensitive? You've been creeping on every girl here all night. We all saw it. One of my friends, Jacob, stepped forward. Phones came out, and people started recording. When he noticed, he immediately became defensive. This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything wrong.
Then why are you at a party with a bunch of kids half your age? Why have you been following girls around all night?
He didn't have an answer. Instead, he kept looking around, as if searching for an escape route. Emma called the beach patrol and reported that a man was harassing people. The moment he heard that, he started backing away. I'm leaving. He tried to sound casual, but his hands were shaking. For the first time, he looked genuinely scared. He realized he wasn't invisible anymore. Beach patrol arrived before he could leave. 2 officers approached him and asked what had happened. I explained everything, and several other people backed me up and described his behavior. The man insisted it was all a misunderstanding and claimed we were overreacting. The officers weren't convinced. They asked for his ID. When they ran his name and came back, their expressions had changed. It turned out he had a history of complaints at different beaches and parties. They detained him and informed him that he was banned from public beaches in the area. If he returned, he would be arrested. That's when he became aggressive. He started yelling that we were ruining his night and threatened to sue us. Nobody cared. The officers escorted him off the beach and we watched him disappear into the darkness before returning to the party. But the mood had changed. Everyone was more alert. We kept an eye on one another and made sure nobody wandered off alone. Jacob even drove Emma and me home afterward. Months have passed. I'm back in Texas and Emma is back at university. But we still talk about that night whenever we get together. Both of us pay closer attention now to people who don't belong, who linger around the edges of groups, and who try too hard to force themselves into situations where they aren't welcome. Because that's how you stop people like him. you stop letting them get away with being invisible. "Hey, can I set this up behind that tree? It'd be a perfect spot for the launch," I said, pointing toward the old barren tree in the far corner of the farm. It was the only one without any decorations or an American flag. No, it's off limits." My cousin shook his head. "That tree's cursed." I started to laugh, but the look on his face stopped me cold. I quieted down and asked him what he meant. "Well, people say that on a stormy night, a woman hung herself from that tree. Lightning struck and burned both her and the tree to cinders. Now it's just the hollow trunk. Folks have tried to tear it down, but some say her spirit still lingers." Raphael moved off to finish setting up the rocket launchers, but I couldn't stop staring at that corner. The tree stood completely alone, its charred, twisted trunk jutting out from the dry grass. Suddenly, a freezing gust of wind whipped toward me from that direction, making me shiver. I laughed it off, trying to stay calm. I was 14 and way too old to buy into some rural ghost story. Besides, it was the 4th of July, and I wasn't about to let a creepy legend ruin my night. I'd been spending summers at Raphael's family farm in central Texas for as long as I could remember. Their 4th of July celebrations blew mine back home out of the water. We had the classic cookouts, parades, and games all day, and the night ended with 40 minutes of heavy-duty fireworks set off by the local crew. They lit up the whole sky in mesmerizing colors, and half the county would show up in lawn chairs to watch. I was obsessed. That year, Raphael and I were finally old enough to help the crew, which felt like I'd finally cracked the inner circle. During the day, I didn't even notice the tree, but as the sun went down, its bareness became impossible to ignore. The first time I spotted something strange, I was lugging a crate of shells toward the launch zone. I'd set the box down to grab some water when my eyes caught a flicker of movement in the corner of the field. I glanced over and saw a pale shape hovering near the base of the trunk. I pointed it out to Raphael, but he shrugged and said it was probably a plastic bag caught in the grass, so I let it go. But every time I had to walk past that corner, my skin prickled as if I were being watched. I kept catching quick flashes of white in my peripheral vision, but whenever I looked directly, nothing was there. The lower the sun sank, the more the hair on my arms stood up. I could swear I felt eyes crawling up the back of my neck. Soon, the music kicked in, and the tree slipped out of my mind. I was hanging out by the big American flag that had been put up that morning, when all of a sudden, the music seemed to fade into the background, and a soft humming melody drifted into my ears. It was weirdly hypnotic, and I felt drawn to it. I slipped away from the crowd and started walking toward the tree. When I finally saw her, my blood went cold. A woman was standing at its base. She was bony, gaunt, and dripping wet, as if she'd just been dragged out of a lake. Her hair was matted to her face, and her hollow red eyes stared right through me. My whole body started shaking. I felt cold and numb, but my heart was pounding. I wanted to reach out and touch her. Then, a group of guys walked by, and when I looked back, she was gone. A hand on my shoulder snapped me back. It was Raphael's dad. He'd found me standing there like a statue. I told him what I'd seen, but he said the atmosphere was probably playing tricks on me and sent me to grab some drinks. I tried to convince myself he was right and kept busy. About an hour later, the fireworks started. The sky exploded with colors. Everyone was cheering. Raphael was standing next to me, eating a popsicle and ranking the fireworks, and I was agreeing with him. Suddenly, the humming returned, and my legs started moving on their own. I walked right past a group of kids and an elderly couple watching the fireworks. I was about 40 feet from the tree, well beyond the launch area. My eyes were glued to it. The weather was clear, without a cloud in sight, and the night sky was bursting with fireworks. Then, thunder rumbled overhead, and lightning cracked across the sky. In that half-second flash, I saw the silhouette of a half-burned woman standing beside the tree. Her arms hung at her sides, and her head was tilted back. Her outline looked wrong, as if she had been burned away around the edges. Her face turned toward me. Her eyes were pleading, and her mouth formed the words, "Help me." I wanted to reach out, but before I could take another step, Raphael came running from the side. He grabbed my arm and dragged me back just as the final shell exploded, painting the sky red and white. I let him pull me back into the crowd and didn't look at the tree again. But when Raphael asked me what had happened, I couldn't stop going into detail about what I'd seen and felt. The next morning, they found the tree split down the center. It looked as though a door had been ripped open from top to bottom. Nobody had heard a thing during that night, and there hadn't been any storms or rain to explain it. Raphael's family didn't say a word about it at breakfast, and neither did we. But we did catch each other's eyes across the table for a second before looking away. 10 years have passed since then. I haven't been back to that farm, and Raphael and I have never mentioned it again. But sometimes I still think about those pleading eyes and can't stop turning the story over in my head. What made her do it? Did she even do it herself, or did somebody else do it? What was she trying to escape that still held her down even in death? Did she finally manage to escape, or is she still stuck there? The guy was a good foot taller than me. He was bald, wearing a cut-off vest and covered in ink. He'd rolled in just after 2 a.m., bought a black coffee, and instead of leaving, he sat by the counter like he had all night and started talking. At first, the small talk was normal. He asked how old I was, how much I made, and what I was studying. He said he'd been in my shoes before, understood the grind. Shortly after, the conversation drifted to the weather, soccer, and rising crime rates in the States. You ever read about Ted Bundy? Who hasn't? I figured he'd make a face at the horror. Instead, he flashed me a grin. Brilliant guy. You imagine how thorough he had to be? Yeah? I mean, people just focus on what he did, but they miss how. The level of control, planning, and patience. Killing is like mastering an art form. He started rattling off about BTK and the Golden State Killer and the specific procedural details of their cases. He mentioned stuff that wasn't even public, as if he'd studied it for years. The more he talked, the more I wanted him out. Suddenly, the door chimed and a blonde girl walked in. She looked like she was in her late 20s, wearing jeans and a jacket with earbuds in. Without even looking over, she headed straight for the refrigerated section. The guy shut up instantly and started staring. The whole time she was there, he didn't take his eyes off her for a second. Uneasy, I moved over to the register to ring her up. She paid, smiled at me, and left. The second the door swung shut, he stood up and followed her out. My stomach dropped. Every instinct I had screamed at me to go out there. He was clearly a creep, and she was alone. I'd only been a month into the 7-Eleven graveyard shift on Grover Street. Ever since I started working, I've always gone for the graveyard shifts because of how peaceful the nights were. Plus, the pay was almost always better. Sure, things got weird once in a while, but I'd handled enough of that to think I knew how the job worked. It was a regular Friday in late August. The clock was reading 2 a.m. I was alone and in the middle of building a well in Minecraft when the creep walked in. He bought a black coffee, sat down, and started talking. The conversation got creepy fast, but I figured I'd just wait for him to finish his coffee and leave. Suddenly, the girl showed up and he followed. For a second, I contemplated following after them and making sure the girl was okay, but thinking better, I called 911. I told the operator everything, from the weird conversation, the serial killer references, how he'd watched her, and how he'd followed her out. 2 units responded within a few minutes. I stood behind the counter for the next hour, trying not to think about what might be happening a few blocks away. I kept picturing her being dragged into an alley, getting killed, or maybe having a fate far worse than death, all because I cared more about my safety than hers. When my phone rang, I jumped. It was a detective. "We got them both," he said. "The woman's fine, but there's something you need to know." As he started explaining, my blood ran cold. The woman wasn't a victim. She was his partner. They'd been at it for 2 years, and investigators had been tracking them for a string of robberies and murders across multiple states. The whole thing was a setup. They'd used this routine before, where she'd act like a regular customer, and he'd act just aggressive or weird enough to freak the clerk out. If the employee felt protective enough to follow them out into the parking lot or alley to check on her, they'd strike. The detectives said the serial killer conversation wasn't random. They'd figured out what kind of person worked overnight shifts alone and what kind of bait would work on them. They'd usually target someone who paid attention and felt responsible if something happened to a woman they'd watched walk out alone at 2 a.m. "You were the target tonight, Alan." He said I made a wise choice by not leaving the counter and playing hero. That was the only reason I was on the phone with him instead of lying somewhere in the dark behind the building, robbed and beaten to death. I didn't feel particularly wise hearing it. I called because I was worried about a stranger I'd watched for maybe 4 minutes, because I had a sister and a mother, and I'd want someone else in my shoes to do the same. When all along, she was fine, and it could have been I who almost didn't make it home. I left that job about 2 months later. I couldn't get the whole episode out of my head no matter how many times my family and friends tried reassuring me. I felt like a fool for being so easy to read. He'd spent maybe 20 minutes figuring out exactly who I was and what would make me walk outside alone at 2 a.m, and he was right about all of it. I was only a second away from stepping out the door and following him. Had I acted slightly differently, hadn't stopped and followed my instincts, I don't think I'd be here telling my story. "Get her!" The guy with the goatee screamed so loud that it felt like he was right behind my ear. I ran for my life. My shoes were splashing through the flooded street, and even though I was nearly wiped out, I kept going. I could hear them gaining on me. "Look how we're bouncing when she runs," one of them laughed, and it made me push even harder. My lungs were burning, and they were so close I could hear their breathing over the thunder. I didn't dare look back. I knew it would only slow me down. Suddenly, the tall guy chucked a rock. It nailed me right below the knee, and my legs gave out. I face-planted into the ditch. My hands and knees hit the freezing water. I wanted to be safe back at home or at Priya's place, but this was all on me for being such an idiot. I was 17 and grounded for the 3rd time that semester, which meant sneaking out to Priya's birthday party was the only way I could be there for her. I'd been doing it since 9th grade and had honestly never gotten caught leaving, only coming back. Priya lived maybe 15 minutes from my house on foot through 2 blocks of residential streets and a stretch of road that was mostly quiet at night. It was barely drizzling when I headed out. The party at Priya's was actually a blast. I knew almost everyone, so ended up staying way later than I planned. By midnight, I figured I should head home. I shot my mom a text, acting like I was already in bed, grabbed my stuff, and said goodbye to Priya. Before I could step down her porch, the light drizzle turned into an absolute downpour. Within 5 minutes, it was coming down in sheets, with wind strong enough to bend the trees sideways. Priya kept pushing me to wait it out, but 10 minutes turned into 30, and the rain kept coming.
Babe, seriously, you gotta stay here. It's nasty out. You can take my bed.
I shook my head.
No way, I'm good. It's like a 15-minute walk, and I've walked in the rain like a million times.
She wouldn't quit until I told her my mom might wake up for water and check my room. She grabbed a yellow raincoat from the closet, made me promise to text her when I got home, and I finally took off. I made it 2 blocks before a gust of wind ripped the coat right off my shoulders. I lunged for it and missed, watching it tumble down the street until it slid under a parked car. By then, I was soaked. My teeth were starting to chatter, but I kept walking. Suddenly, a pair of headlights cut through the rain at the end of Deller Street. Hoping it was a neighbor or someone kind enough to help, I stepped to the curb and waved. The car slowed down, and the window rolled down. There were 3 guys inside, maybe mid-30s. They were wearing bandanas and gold chains, and one had tattoos all over. Even through the rain, I could tell right away that flagging them down was a huge mistake. "Need a ride, sweetheart?" "You can ride all of us." They started laughing. My stomach dropped. I backed away from the curb, kept my eyes forward, and started walking faster. My hands were shaking, and heart started pounding. The car kept rolling alongside me, and the comments got grosser. All of a sudden, they swung the passenger door open. "Come on, get in. We'll take you wherever you're going." "After we're done with you." Ignoring them, I pushed myself to walk faster, but the guy was big and fast. Before I could sprint, he was out of the car and had my arm. I screamed and yanked back, twisting until I felt my jacket sleeve tear. He wouldn't let go, so I headbutted him. He stumbled a bit. I broke free and ran. I could hear him cursing behind me. He threw a bottle that missed me by an inch. Rest 2 spilled out of the car, chasing me down the street, yelling that they were going to teach me a lesson. I didn't stop until a rock slammed into my knee, and I face-planted right into the ditch. I tried to scramble up, but my knee was screaming in pain. I could hear them closing in. Maybe they were 15 feet back. I panicked, scanning the road until I saw a gap in a concrete drainage pipe. I dove for it and squeezed inside just as they reached the edge. It was a tight, nasty sewer tunnel, maybe 4 feet wide, with freezing water soaking my wrists. The smell was god-awful, but I was too terrified to care. I pressed myself against the wall, pulled my knees up, and clamped my hand over my mouth to keep my breathing quiet. They stood right outside for what felt like an eternity. I heard footsteps, voices, and the sweep of a flashlight thrice. Each time it hit the near tunnel, my breath hitched. I was well past 400 when I finally heard them arguing. About 10 minutes after the door slammed, an engine roared to life, and it was the sound of the rain again. I waited another 20 minutes just to be safe before I crawled out. The street was empty. I limped the rest of the way home, shivering so hard my teeth were rattling, and snuck in through the back. I went straight upstairs and hopped into the shower, fully dressed, staying there until the hot water finally gave out. I told my parents I'd crashed at Priya's. They grounded me again, but they bought it. I went to the cops the next morning with descriptions of the guys and the car, but since I didn't remember the plate, they could only try so much. I haven't snuck out since, because there are some lessons you only need to learn one time. I'd barely put my phone on the nightstand after posting the first snap of Nina and me together when my bedroom window shattered. My phone clattered to the floor, and I flinched as my ex, Rebecca, crawled inside, looking like an angry bull.
Where's homewrecker Aaron?
Rebecca? What the hell? Get out!
I'm asking one last time. Where is that bitch?
I met Rebecca at a college fest. She was in the music program and actually had a pretty decent voice. I asked her out, and by the time the weekend was over, we were official. The first few months were great. We clicked on everything. She loved hanging out with my friends and was already hinting at a long-term relationship. But around the 1-year mark, things started to fall apart. I landed an internship at an architecture firm downtown, and she started getting super anxious when I wasn't around. I kept telling her work was hectic, but nothing helped. She'd call me 5 times in a row if I didn't answer once, and eventually, she even started calling my coworkers. When she thought I was asleep, she'd go through my phone. I tried talking to her and setting some boundaries, but it would only stick for a week before she'd slide right back. That Valentine's Day, Rebecca wanted me to take off work for a trip to Miami she'd planned, but I was gunning for a full-time offer and told her I couldn't make it happen. She completely lost it, trashing the apartment and screaming that I was choosing my job over her. I told her I was done with the drama and ended it right then. As expected, she didn't handle it well. She texted all my friends and tried to humiliate me in ways I wouldn't want to remember. But after a few weeks of being ignored, she finally went dark, and I actually had an impression she was over it. By September, I'd started seeing Nina from work. Compared to Rebecca, she was a breath of fresh air. About 2 weeks in, I posted a photo of us on Snapchat. I took it while dining at this rooftop bar. I felt like things were finally clicking into place. I had no idea Rebecca was still watching me from a burner account and that she was about to break in. "Rebecca, get out or I'm calling 911, I warned her.
How dare you go behind my back? You think I wouldn't find out? I'll show you.
She shoved past me, tearing through the living room and screaming insults about Nina. I scrambled after her, yelling for her to stop, but she ignored me completely. She stormed into the kitchen and started flinging silverware across the floor. "Seriously, Rebecca, get the hell out of my apartment! We are nothing!" I stepped in front of her. She stood still for a second and blinked, looking shocked that I'd actually stand my ground. I was heaving, hoping she'd maybe break down and run. Instead, she started clapping and giggling like a maniac. Suddenly, she lunged. She grabbed the box cutter from the table and drove it into my forearm. Pain exploded up my arm, and I screamed.
Now tell me this is nothing!
She hissed, yanking it out and shoving it back. Blood dripped from the deep cut. I was in shock, stumbling back against the wall. But she wasn't done. She kicked me in the calf, and while I doubled over, she bolted toward the basement to tear up my storage unit. I fought to catch my breath before I somehow limped to the bedroom to grab my phone. I was dialing 911, but she was already out the door by the time the operator answered. I got 4 stitches, filed a police report, and took out a restraining order the next morning. When the cops questioned her, she denied ever being there. Of course, the hallway camera in my building had been spray painted over earlier that week, so I had 0 footage and nothing to show for it but my arm. I really thought the restraining order would stop her. But 3 weeks later, the snaps started up again. There was me leaving my apartment at 8 in the morning, shot from across the street and at the gym, taken through the parking lot window. She even captured me walking into Nina's building across town. Every snap came from a fresh burner account without texts or bitmojis. I knew the game she was playing. She just wanted to make sure she'd be in the back of my mind 24/7. I brought every single screenshot to the detective, but he just told me to keep documenting and said it was tough to prosecute without something more direct. I hated hearing that. One morning, I checked Snapchat, half expecting to get another snap from the street. Instead, I got a photo of a bedroom wall with my picture pinned to the center. It was surrounded by candles and other stuff I didn't want to look at too hard. The caption read, "I'm going to get you back very soon." I rushed back to the police with everything. They went to her place and did a tour, but they said it looked totally normal. There were no shrines or anything. Either she'd scrubbed it before they got there, or she was running this out of a place nobody would ever find out. By the time they tried to trace the account, it was already dead. She's been quiet for weeks now. Nina even felt safe enough to move back to her own place. I've stopped obsessively scanning the street every single morning, though I still catch myself doing it half the time anyway. I don't know if she's finally moving on, or if she's just getting smarter about how she does this. Honestly, I don't know which one scares me more. When I was little, my mother always used to tell me that she loved me more than anything in the universe, and that she would always do everything in her power to make sure I was happy. These words used to bring me comfort in my early childhood, but unfortunately, that all changed when I realized just how far my mother was willing to go to keep her word. I witnessed her commit unspeakable atrocities for my sake, and I've never been the same to this very day. My father abandoned my mother and me for a younger woman after I turned 14. He didn't even file for a divorce, as he just fled the state with his new wife to avoid paying child support. Things began to fall apart pretty quickly, as my mother was a traditional housewife who didn't work at my father's request. It was really difficult for her to stand up on her own 2 feet, but despite that, she did everything she could to support us by taking on several odd jobs. I tried to help out, as I attempted to find jobs of my own, but my mother wouldn't let me. as she said it was her duty to provide and that I was still too young to be working. Despite how hard she worked, we barely had enough to cover rent, and we had even less for groceries. It wasn't long before we began rationing our food, and we often starved ourselves on many nights. There was one particular night when I was starving so badly that I began to cry. So my mother came into my room and held me in her arms as she said,
I know things are pretty hard for us right now, Charlie. And it breaks my heart seeing you like this. But I promise you that from tonight henceforth, you'll never go hungry again. I have a plan, and once I carry it out, we'll go back to having full plates for dinner like we used to.
I could tell my mother was just trying to comfort me, as even at that young age I knew just how bad things were. We still hadn't paid the rent, and I knew there were still many hungry nights ahead of us. However, my mother had this disturbing look in her eyes, and to my surprise, she kept her word, as we had full plates of dinner the following night. While I was ecstatic to eat, I couldn't really tell what type of protein was on my plate, and I remember asking my mother about the mystery meat. Hey Mom, what type of meat is this? I don't recognize the texture or taste, and how did you get so much of it? My mother then calmly looked at me and said,
There's no need to worry about where the meat came from or how I got it, Charlie. Just be grateful that we now have more than enough to eat for dinner, just like I promised.
I could tell my mother wasn't going to tell me the truth, and even though I was worried, I scarfed it all down as I was starving. However, even though I ate it all, my gut kept telling me that something was wrong. The following nights, my mother returned with the same bags of mystery meat, and every time I tried to pry, she would look at me with an eerie smile before uttering the words,
Bon appetit, Charlie.
I thought about leaving things be, as even though I didn't know the origin of the mystery meat, we weren't starving anymore. But my curiosity kept eating away at me inside. So one night, I decided to follow her. I trailed my mother after she left the house, and it only took a couple of minutes before I uncovered the horrific truth behind the mystery meat. I watched in horror as my mother lured a stray dog that I'd seen around the neighborhood into a dark alley. I can't bring myself to recount the morbid atrocities my mother committed against that little animal with a large cleaver. I threw up all over myself, and I ran back home crying. After I regained my composure, I waited for my mother to arrive, and as soon as she walked through the door, I screamed the words, How could you do something so horrible, Mom? I followed you, and I saw what you did. My mother, who now had tears in her eyes, calmly looked at me and said,
Please don't look at me like that, Charlie. I am your mother, and I did what I had to make sure we could survive. Even if it meant doing those heinous things to put food on your plate.
We had other choices. I could have worked and supported you. Anything but this.
They were only strays, Charlie. No one is going to miss them. Please don't make me feel even worse than I already do. Even if you had helped out by working, that wouldn't have changed our situation. We had no choice. So please just go to your room and forget everything you saw tonight.
I couldn't believe what my own mother was saying. I'd always loved animals, and even if she asked me to let it go, I couldn't stomach the horrors I'd witnessed that night. So I ran to my room and called the authorities. My mother was arrested and formally charged with aggravated animal cruelty, a felony carrying a sentence of up to 3 years in state prison. I was taken into Child Protective Services, and I can never forget the look on her face as they took her away. The decision that night has haunted me ever since. I kept telling myself I made the right decision by calling the authorities, but I couldn't help but feel like I'd betrayed my mother. I spent several nights cursing my father for putting us in that situation. But in the end, I blamed myself, as I knew the only reason my mother did what she did was to put food on my plate. Figuring the door was busted, I pushed it 3 more times. Suddenly, the door flew open, and George appeared, breathing heavily through his nose. He was taller than I remembered. His eyes were dark and empty, as if he hadn't had a proper night's sleep in years, and he looked furious. I froze. I opened and closed my mouth.
George, let the poor kid in.
Sandra giggled from somewhere inside the house. "Get inside," George growled. "I'm fine. I started to protest, but George had already yanked me through the doorway and locked the door behind us. I remembered the day our neighbors George and Sandra Halpern moved onto Derringer Street. The guy was super quiet, always shot dirty looks at us kids, and never talked to anyone. When my mom went to greet them with welcome to the neighborhood cookies, he yelled at his wife, Sandra, just for opening the door. After that, the blinds were always drawn, and he never let her out of his sight. If Sandra was outside and someone tried to chat her up, George would pop up instantly, grab her arm, and march her back inside. Our neighbor, Mrs. Winson, called it controlling. Mom said it was concerning. All the parents on the block would gossip about him and told the kids that going anywhere near their house was strictly forbidden. I obliged, except for that one summer vacation. It was a Saturday evening, and I was bored out of my wits. My best friend Danny was stuck in Florida at his grandparents', and my older brother was busy working at the pool and wanted nothing to do with me. I'd already biked to the gas station and back so often it wasn't even fun anymore, so I decided to play Ding Dong Ditch. I laced up my kicks and headed out, scanning the block for a perfect target. I somehow ended up on the street across from the Halperns, and in my 11-year-old brain, hitting the scariest house on the street felt like the ultimate flex. I figured it was time to test my luck. I tiptoed onto the porch and smashed the doorbell before I sprinted away and ducked behind a bush. I waited, maybe 5 minutes, but nothing happened. And then, about 15 minutes later, I was inside their home, facing the weird married duo. Sandra was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of lemonade. When she spotted me, she gave me this massive ear-to-ear grin and asked how I was doing. Good? I managed to stammer out.
Here, have some lemonade.
Up close, she was actually pretty, with dark eyes that crinkled at the corners when she laughed. She started chatting me up about school and my summer plans, even cracking a joke that was actually pretty funny. Meanwhile, George simply stood in the corner with his arms crossed, watching her without saying a single word, like some prisoner. Do you mind if I use the bathroom?
Sure thing. Just head down the hallway. It's the second door.
Sandra said, pointing the way. I nodded and headed that way, but I was so busy looking over my shoulder to see where George was that I ended up opening the wrong door. The smell hit me first. It was thick and waxy, with this gross, rotten scent underneath, like someone had left candles burning over raw meat. The room was pitch black, except for maybe 30 candles set up in a big circle on the floor. Right in the middle was a man-sized doll, though only about 2 feet tall, made out of fabric, what looked like real hair, and some other stuff I couldn't identify from where I was standing. Ceramic bowls were placed all around it. I stepped a bit closer and nearly pissed my pants. The bowls were filled with animal bones, some dark, crusty stuff that looked a lot like dried blood, and rows of baby teeth in different shapes and sizes. The floor was covered in symbols, painted with incredibly steady strokes, a whole grid of them stretched from wall to wall. The doll was clearly meant to be a man. It was even wearing a tiny version of the same gray button-up George was always in. I yelped and turned around to bolt, only to come face to face with Sandra, who was still grinning.
Guess little Lucas doesn't watch where he's going, huh?
She giggled, dragging her index finger from my temple down to my cheek. Sweat glistened on my palms, and my heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I tried to back away, but she moved closer.
You see, George was my high school crush forever. But he only had eyes for my best friend. I had to figure out a way to fix that.
I glanced back down the hall. George was still standing down there, watching us. His expression hadn't changed, and his eyes were as hollow as if he were a corpse dragging his body around. Suddenly, Sandra grabbed my shirt and pulled me closer.
If you tell anyone about this room, I'm going to make you love me too.
I booked it home and told my mom I'd been hanging out at Danny's. I sat through dinner that night and answered questions about my day, but I didn't breathe a word about what I'd seen. I was only 11, but I wasn't stupid. I knew if I told my parents, they'd call the cops and maybe Sandra would get in trouble, but I didn't think anyone could actually stop her. I steered clear of Derringer Street for the rest of the summer. One time, when I was riding by, I caught a glimpse of George standing on the porch like a statue in that same gray shirt. He still looked furious, but now I knew the nightmare he was living every single day. We ended up moving a couple of years later, and I never laid eyes on either of them again. I've thought about it a lot since I grew up. Whatever was going on in that room and whatever Sandra thought she was doing, it worked. George never left. In those 2 years of watching them across the street, he never once looked like he wanted to go anywhere, and she never looked like she was breaking a sweat over it. I tried to duck into another aisle, gripping my 7-year-old nephew's hand as tightly as I could. Liam complained that I was walking too fast and needed to slow down. I ignored his whining. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I was desperately hoping I was just being paranoid. But the guy followed us, first to the holiday decorations, then the snacks, then the paper goods aisle. He was around 6 feet tall, his face mostly hidden beneath a baseball cap, and he'd gotten way too friendly with Liam since the second we'd walked in around half an hour earlier. I kept telling myself he was just another shopper looking for 4th of July gear, maybe a little lost. People wander aimlessly through the store all the time. I tried to convince myself it didn't mean anything. Little did I know that brushing it off was the biggest mistake I could have made. It was the afternoon of July 3rd, and I was visiting my sister in Atmore for the 4th of July weekend. I'd missed Liam's birthday earlier that year, so he'd insisted I come down for the holiday to make up for it. I couldn't say no to those big blue eyes and ended up making the 3-hour drive. Around 2 p.m., Liam asked if I'd take him to the Walmart on Briar Road to pick up some decorations and fireworks for the next day's cookout. My sister, Lena, offered to take him, but he only wanted me to go with him. I told her to stay back and get the food started while I made a quick run to the store. Outside, the whole town was decked out in red, white, and blue. Flags were everywhere, and Liam was beaming with excitement. We'd been inside for about 15 minutes and had already finished the seasonal aisle, grabbed our napkins and plates, and found the string lights Liam wanted. We were just headed toward the fireworks section when this guy walked up to us, holding a bundle of white and blue lights. "This one's way better than what you've got. It changes speeds." He started rambling about why we should pick his suggestion instead, until Liam finally wore me down and I had to switch. I thanked him and kept moving, picking up the rest of the items on Liam's list, hoping he'd leave us alone. But he kept popping up with another helpful suggestion. I realized pretty quickly that he wasn't actually shopping. He didn't have a cart or a basket, and every time I glanced up, he was only a couple of feet away. He was maybe 50, heavyset and wearing a plain gray shirt. There was nothing remarkable about him, except the way he kept staring at Liam instead of me. When our eyes met, he gave me a smile that made my skin crawl. He tried pushing a different brand of sparklers on us, claiming they'd last longer, but I ignored him and ducked into the next aisle. Over in the toy section, he actually crouched down to Liam's level, grabbed his hands, and said, "Kids have such soft hands these days." I yanked Liam back so fast that he stumbled. I stepped between them and told the guy clearly that if he came near us again, I was going to security. His smile vanished. "Jeez, I was just trying to help." He straightened up, gave me a hard look and walked away into the store. I didn't see him again. We finished shopping in about 10 minutes. I paid, kept Liam glued to my side, and hurried us out to the car. Once Liam was buckled in and the bags were in the trunk, I jumped behind the wheel. I'd barely pulled onto the main road when I spotted a beat-up white van in the rearview mirror. I tried to ignore it, but I felt like I was being followed, so I changed lanes. My stomach dropped when the van shifted with me. My palms were slick on the wheel, and my heart was racing. I took an unplanned right turn, hoping to shake him, but he stayed glued to my bumper. I even gunned it through a yellow light, but he blew through it without a second thought. In the back seat, Liam was still chattering about the fireworks, oblivious. I forced myself to answer him, keeping my voice steady while my knuckles turned white from gripping the wheel. I made a few more random turns, praying it was just a coincidence, but the van was always right there behind us.
Auntie, is that car racing us?
Liam said, looking out the window.
No, sweetie. It'll go a different way.
I couldn't drive us home. I wasn't about to lead some creep to our doorstep, so I headed straight for the Millfield Police Department on Cascade Avenue, pulling into the lot and parking right under the bright lights near the entrance. The van slowed down as it crawled past the station before speeding off. I took a breath and sat there for a minute before getting Liam out and heading inside. The police documented the incident and pulled the Walmart security footage. They saw him, but somehow he managed to dodge the cameras every time he looked in our direction. It was like he knew exactly where they were. They never caught the guy. The van had been reported stolen weeks earlier, and they didn't have any leads. Liam still had an awesome 4th of July. To this day, he has no idea how close we came to trouble. He's growing up and becoming more familiar with the horrors of the world. Someday, if he remembers any of it, he'll realize how differently that day could have ended. The thought still chills me every time the 4th of July comes around. I check my rearview mirror every single time I get in the car with him now. I don't think that's a habit I'm ever going to lose. The happiest moment of my life was when my son Steven and my daughter Sarah were born. I always wanted to become a mother for as long as I can remember, and having children to love was all I ever wanted in the world. I married a great guy a few years after college, and we built a home together with our children. I thought I'd done everything right. But unfortunately, things went south when the great guy I'd married turned into a monster. Our marriage fell apart, and out of spite, he ripped my children away from me. I wasn't going to let that happen, so I took my kids and ran as far away as I could. Life as a single mother was difficult, and what was even worse was that my children weren't happy that I'd taken them away. They refused to talk to me no matter what I said, and I knew it was all because their demon of a father had painted me as the bad guy. Despite their ominous silence whenever I entered the room, I still loved them. Steven and Sarah had just turned 17, and I knew separating them from their father during their teenage years was hard on them. I hoped that one day, after their teenage years had long passed, they would understand why I had to take them far away and love me again as their mother. But things only got worse. Both Steven and Sarah had stopped eating, and it began to worry me after I'd prepared full meals, only for them to leave everything completely untouched at the table. I tried to convince them to eat something, saying,
I understand you both are angry that I took you away from your father, but starving yourselves won't accomplish anything. You're still growing children, and you need to eat. I've accepted the fact that you aren't speaking to me, but I won't accept this. You're both getting really pale. And Sarah, your bones are starting to show. I don't know what your father said about me to drive you both to these extremes, but please, eat the meals I made for you.
Both Steven and Sarah stared at me with a hollow look in their eyes, and I ran out of the room crying. I knew their father, Nathan, had probably told them all sorts of lies and atrocities about me, which is why they'd started acting this way out of spite. I was planning on having a long talk with them the following morning, but their brute of a father had somehow found us. He'd been stalking us for a while now, ever since I took my kids back, and I had to move to new places just to get away from him. I could feel my heart racing in my chest as I heard him banging on the door of our new home. Please open the door, Stacy. I know you're going through a lot right now, but I just want to talk.
Get the hell away from us, Nathan! I know you just want to take my kids away and put them back in that dark place you'd left them, but I won't let you!
I quickly grabbed Stephen and Sarah, and I took them through the back door to the car. Nathan had heard the engine start, so he ran in front of the vehicle, saying, "I'm not gonna let you leave until we talk and you stop this madness."
I'm done listening to your lies, Nathan. You've turned my kids against me. Now they won't talk or eat.
Stacy, you're unwell. Please, just get out of the car and we can talk. I took a long look at the man I once loved and realized that nothing had changed. He kept trying to make me believe that I was unwell or sick in the head, which is why I left, and I wasn't going to let him gaslight me anymore. So I stepped on the gas. He jumped out of the way at the last second, and I escaped with my kids, but it wasn't long before he tracked us down again. I took out the metal baseball bat and stood between him and my children. Nathan attempted to turn them against me with his usual lies again, as he said, "Stacy, you're not well. You need help. Just look at what you're doing to our children. Please, let them rest." He was an expert at brainwashing Stephen and Sarah, so I turned to them and said,
Don't listen to him. I'm your mother. I'm not unwell. I love you. Your misogynistic pig of a father just thinks a single mother isn't enough to raise her own children. And that's why he's trying to take you away from me. But I'll never let that happen.
Nathan didn't even let me finish before he denied the whole thing. "That's not true, Stacy. Please, open your eyes and see the horrific things you've done to our kids."
I can't believe I married you. How could I love such a garbage human being who divorced me when I was at my lowest and tried to take my kids away?
Nathan was crying now in an attempt to gain sympathy from our children. He then looked at me with his cynical eyes as he said, "That's not what happened, Stacy, and you know it. I won't blame you because you aren't in your right mind and you've somehow erased the truth from your memory since the accident happened. But this is going too far. Our children are dead. You were driving and you didn't see the truck. Both Stephen and Sarah died on impact, but you managed to survive."
You're a liar! That never happened! There was no accident, and my children are right here beside me.
Listen to me, Stacy. You couldn't handle the grief when you woke up, and you went mad, so you had to be admitted into a psychiatric ward. However, you unfortunately escaped and exhumed our children's remains from their graves before fleeing with their decaying bodies. Can't you see that the corpses you've been running around with are the rotting remains of our children? Doesn't the smell bother you? I still don't know why you exhumed their bodies or what you plan to do next, but you're a danger to yourself and everyone around you. The authorities have already been informed, and they'll be here any minute. So please, you need to come back to the psychiatric ward. I'm doing this so our children can finally rest in peace and for you to get the help you so desperately need. I was horrified. I couldn't believe my own husband could spew such false and horrible atrocities out of his mouth. While I could admit that my children had lost some skin and were looking bony due to their loss of appetite, they were still my children, regardless of their desolate state. They didn't die in that crash. But no one would believe me. That's why I had to take them out of the ground, and I wasn't going to let him put them back in that dark wooden box. So I struck him hard on the head with the metal bat and left his motionless body bleeding while I took Stephen and Sarah to the car. I told them that we were safe now and that we were going to get out of the city. However, they didn't respond, as they just stared at me with their hollow eyes in silence.
I didn't really care anymore that they refused to talk to me, and I assured them that it didn't matter if they didn't eat my meals or how bad they smelled because I would be by their side forever. I picked a few maggots off Stephen's face before starting the engine. I was their mother, and nothing, not even death, would ever separate them from me.
I can never forget the feeling of his blood splattering across my face, or the empty look in his corpse's eyes as a pool of blood slowly spread from his head across the rest of his body. I'm sure he never imagined, at the time, that streaming could go this far. My name is Matthew Devonshire, and I come from 5 generations of successful architects, all the way to my father Jackson Devonshire, who had hoped I'd go to college and take over for him once he had retired. I, however, had other plans, and after graduating from high school, I made it clear to my parents that I wouldn't be going to college to become an architect, but was going to be a streamer instead. All my father had to say was, "This better be a joke, Matthew. That kind of decision is laughable, and I could never endorse that. You can paint me out to be the bad guy, hate me for a couple of years, but you're going to college, and one day, you'll thank me for it." I understood that, like most parents, my dad couldn't see the bigger picture. So shortly after that, I began my streaming career without my parents' approval, as I wouldn't let anything stop me from being one of the biggest on Twitch. After a few months of trying and failing with the usual methods like desktop games and Discord, I decided the next move was to go to IRL and hopefully gain more traction that way. One day, my IRL streaming took me to a local basketball game, and one guy in particular stood out. His name was Zachariah. After the game, I walked up to him, pretty excited, and struck up a conversation. "Hey man, you're pretty good. I'm talking NBA level good." "Thanks, man. Is the camera for YouTube or something?" "No, bro, I'm a streamer. Just started, but I'm gonna be one of the biggest eventually." "One of the biggest, huh? Well, that's pretty exciting. Do you have a team or manager, anything like that?" "Well, not yet. I'm just taking it one step at a time, honestly." "'Cause, I've always been interested. Maybe we could team up. I could help you out." At this point, the conversation had gone on for much longer than I'd anticipated, and I wasn't planning on teaming up with someone I barely knew, so I declined. "Come on, man. You're not even gonna give me a chance? We could be good together. One of the biggest." At this point, he had closed the distance between us and was now tightly grabbing onto my arm while staring me in the eyes. His gaze was so intense that I wasn't sure if he was aware of how tightly he was holding on to me. "Yo, Zach, are we gonna play or what?" He seemed to snap out of it once his name was called, and I took advantage of the moment, said goodbye, and began walking away. The next day, I decided to stream at the carnival. While walking through a crowd, I felt a tap on my shoulder and was shocked to see Zachariah looming over me, with the biggest grin and a camera in his hand. "Hey man, I was thinking about yesterday and all you said, and I really want to help you out. I noticed the camera you're using is pretty cheap, so I got us this camera, and I figured I could handle everything behind the camera while you just focus on being the star you are and entertaining." The word confused wasn't enough to describe how I felt in that moment. While this wasn't uncommon in Twitch streaming, I couldn't begin to understand how he found me or why he would spend $1,000 on a camera for someone he just met. But it was pretty obvious there was something off about this man, and I didn't want the situation to go on any further. "You're a creep, man. Stay away from me." I walked away after that interaction, and when I got home, I quickly found the account that belonged to him, banned it from my page, and hoped that was the last I'd ever see of Zachariah. But sadly, that wasn't the case. In the next few days, I saw Zachariah almost everywhere I went. He didn't speak to me, he didn't bother me, but he made sure I knew he was there, and something about that terrified me. One day, I went out grocery shopping, and when I turned a corner into the cereal section, my heart dropped as I spotted Zachariah in the parking lot walking towards the store. I immediately hurried to the checkout, paid for my stuff, got in the car, and locked the door. My heart raced, and I began breathing heavily, not understanding how this had become my life. Just then, I decided I'd had enough. I started the car and headed toward the police station, paranoia forcing my eyes to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Halfway there, I glanced back again and noticed a blue tarp in the back seat that definitely hadn't been there that morning. In pure confusion, I uttered under my breath, "What the fuck?" Almost immediately, Zachariah jumped out from underneath the tarp and lunged for the wheel, taking us off-road and knocking me unconscious. I woke up a few minutes later, sat on an empty road to the faint sound of Zachariah's voice.
He's finally waking up. Here we go, guys. Welcome all you Twitch viewers. We're live here on Devonshire HD. And first off, I just want to say a big thanks to all of you for tuning in to what we all hope is going to be one of the biggest channels on Twitch one day. But let's think about it for a second. Is our boy Matthew really the one to take this channel forward? Is he willing to do what it takes to get there? Because I offered resources. I offered time and talent. But what did he do? He ran. You ran from your dreams, Matt. Ran from this channel's destiny. Do you not want it, Matthew?
This is crazy.
Exactly. Hesitation. We can't have that now, can we?
Zachariah reached into the car and pulled out a gun before pointing it at me.
It's time to say goodbye, Matt.
I got off the ground and lunged at him before he could pull the trigger. The gun fell out of his hand and I immediately picked it up and shot him in the leg. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see that my Twitch viewers had hit a surprisingly high amount. But after the shot, the stream was blocked and my channel was temporarily blocked.
Oh, man, what the fuck? Are you insane? You said the gun wouldn't be loaded. You didn't pay me for this shit.
The fear in Zachariah's eyes was evident, and as I walked closer, I could tell he was beginning to understand I truly meant it when I said I'd do whatever it took to be one of the biggest.
Please, man. This is crazy. This is fucking crazy. You got what you wanted. The views are up. Everyone thinks you're a victim. You don't have to do this.
I shot him in the head, and while I waited for the police to arrive, I honestly couldn't help but think out loud to myself, I wonder what the chat would be saying right now.
Please don't let the man I'm with see this. He's going to take me somewhere bad.
My hands shook as I read the note I'd found tucked between the packets of Doritos. Before I could even process what I was reading, I found another one tucked behind the bags of Pringles. It said the same exact thing. I scanned the aisle. At the far end, a little girl was watching me with tear-filled eyes. She looked about 8 or 9, with dark hair and a purple hoodie. She was pale, fidgeting with the hem of her sweatshirt. As soon as our eyes met, she looked in the direction of the man she had come in with. I stood up, clutching the note. I had to do something, but it was way past midnight and there were hardly any people around to help me if he had a weapon. I'd been working the graveyard shift at the Allendale Road Quick Mart for 7 months. It was usually just me from 11 to 7, except for the occasional truckers and insomniacs. But the pay was decent and I really liked the quiet. It was a normal Monday night. Around 12:40, the little girl walked in with a middle-aged dude in a trench coat. He had a scruffy, unkempt beard and was holding her hand really tight. They went straight to the beverage aisle.
Grab whatever you want. I won't stop after this,
he told her. She nodded and wandered over to the snacks. At a glance, they looked like a normal father and daughter, but the way she kept checking on him made me pay attention. She seemed anxious and fidgety as she started grabbing cookies and candy. About 5 minutes later, a few customers came in. I rang them up, then headed over to restock the snack aisle. Suddenly, I saw a pink note tucked between bags of chips and another one between the cookies. All of them were a desperate call for help. Walking back to the register, I saw she'd left even more of them. I felt sick, thinking about what she might be going through. I slipped into the back office and dialed 911 just before he rounded the corner with the little girl. He was holding a bottle of water and a pack of gum. Getting a better look at him, he seemed like a completely average guy in his 40s and looked like one of those neighbors you'd never look twice at. He flashed a smile as he set his things on the counter. I forced a smile back, trying to keep him talking until the police showed up.
Cute girl. Is she your daughter?
Yeah,
How old is she?
8. He started making small talk about road conditions while I rang him up. He sounded totally relaxed, like there wasn't a single thing wrong in the world. Meanwhile, the girl stood behind his left shoulder, staring at the floor the entire time. He grabbed his change, said thanks, and walked her out. Right then, 2 patrol cars pulled into the lot. He saw the lights, stopped, and put his hands up. Officers swarmed him before he even got to his car. He kept shouting that it was a mistake, that he was her father, and that he was taking her home. They searched the trunk and found a toolkit with duct tape and zip ties, plus a bag of kids' clothes. They arrested him on the spot. He was still yelling as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. They took the girl to the hospital to get checked out. The cop who checked in with me before he left said she barely spoke and kept asking for her mom. I went home at 7 a.m., feeling like a hero. I even texted my mom about it. A week later, 2 detectives came by. They sat me down and dropped the truth. The guy was indeed her dad. He just won full custody after a long court battle and was driving her to his place in another state. The kid was furious about leaving her mom, so she planted those notes, hoping someone would stop the trip. The duct tape and zip ties were work gear from his construction job. The clothes were his younger daughter's. I didn't know what to say. Then, the detective mentioned that her mom had been arrested 2 days earlier. Her phone was full of messages showing she'd spent weeks coaching the kid on exactly what to do if her dad got custody. The detective thanked me and said I did the right thing based on what I saw. I nodded and showed them out. I kept thinking about the guy's face when they threw him in that cruiser. Now, when I look back, he doesn't seem angry. Instead, he looks desperate, caught in yet another act of manipulation and realizing he really couldn't trust his child. Like he knew how bad it looked, but couldn't get the words out fast enough to explain. And I made it tougher for him. My mom kept saying I did what I thought was right. Maybe that's true, but I didn't save a kid that night. But it sure doesn't feel like it. The woman kept swinging on the rope tied to the highest branch of the tree. Her laughter surpassed the sound of thunder. It was surprisingly clear, even with the storm booming overhead, and she was humming an old tune I remembered listening to on my granny's gramophone when she was alive. I was soaked to the bone, so was she, but neither of us seemed bothered by the rain or the isolation. The trees swayed around us. Lightning illuminated the clearing, and I caught sight of her back. She was petite and looked to be around my age. Her ankle-length hair dripped with water and swayed with her, and all I wanted was for her to turn around. Suddenly, she stopped swinging, and the trees seemed to stop swaying with her. My heart started pounding in my chest. A couple of seconds passed. She sat as still as a statue. I shuffled my feet, feeling kind of creeped out. Someone whispered in my ear,
"Maybe you shouldn't have left the house tonight."
A few hours before I met this woman, I had been lying on my sofa, enjoying the rain and thinking it would be a boring Wednesday. I had returned home a day earlier from a brutal 9-hour shift behind the wheel, and all I needed was some takeout pasta and a couple of packs of cigarettes. I'd stocked up at Walmart at the beginning of the week, but with the storm trapping me inside, I'd burned through them faster than I realized. By 9, the shakes were already setting in. My nerves were fried, and merely sitting on the couch felt like trying to hold back a flood. I spent the next 20 minutes tearing the kitchen apart. I tossed out old menus and junk. I was desperate for a stray cigarette, but I couldn't even find a half-smoked butt. There's a gas station 4 blocks over that stays open 24/7. A news anchor on TV was begging people to stay inside and call 911 only for emergencies, but I didn't care. I grabbed my black hoodie and stepped out. It was only a 10-minute trip, and I'd walked it in the rain a million times. I made it about 3 blocks when a high-pitched, childish giggle cut through the thunder. I froze, trying to listen, but all I could hear was the rain hammering down and the low rumble of thunder. I started walking again, figuring it was just the weather messing with me. But a few steps later, the laugh echoed again. I stopped and scanned the street. All I could see were empty cars, puddles, and darkness. I shook it off, told myself I was hearing things, and kept moving. The laugh cut through the rain again, louder this time. And now I knew exactly where it was coming from. It came from my left, from a patch of dense woods behind the houses, and it felt like it was beckoning me in. All of a sudden, my feet started carrying me towards it, as if they had minds of their own. I didn't realize how deep into the woods I'd gone until branches started whipping against my sides, cutting through my hoodie. My boots sank into the mud, but I couldn't stop. The sound of that laugh felt like a physical tug. Suddenly, the trees opened into a small clearing. In the middle of it stood the biggest, deadest tree I'd ever seen. It was little more than a massive trunk with a few scattered branches, and it looked completely out of place in a neighborhood woodland. A rope swing hung from the highest limb, and a woman giggled as she swung from it. Her back was facing me. Every time lightning cracked overhead, she burst out laughing. My palms started sweating. I couldn't move. Her skin was all wrong. Lightning flashed again, and I saw it clearly. It looked dark, leathery, and tight, like it had been scorched in a fire and never healed properly. She kept swinging while I stood there staring, my heart hammering against my ribs. Suddenly, her head snapped toward me. I screamed and stumbled backward. Instead of pupils, her eyes glowed amber, like a pair of lit matches in the dark. Blood leaked from the corners of her mouth, dripping off her chin into the muck, and she was still laughing. Before I could blink, she dropped from the swing, landing on her hands and feet, and started crawling toward me. I screamed and hauled myself out of there, but she was way faster. Her giggles echoed through the trees as she closed the distance. I stumbled through the woods, branches raked my face, drawing blood, but I didn't dare slow down. I could feel her right on my heels. Suddenly, her arm shot out and snagged my ankle, dragging me down hard into the dirt. My head cracked against a thick root, but before she could pin me, I grabbed a heavy branch and swung with everything I had. It caught her squarely and knocked her back several feet. I didn't wait to see if she got up. I scrambled to my feet and ran blindly until I was inside my apartment with the deadbolt thrown. I sank to the floor with my back against the door and stayed there for a long time. I eventually made my way to my couch with my eyes glued to the front door, occasionally checking the windows until the gray morning light finally started bleeding through the curtains. The rain died down by morning and the world went back to normal, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, her face was there. I thought about reporting it a few times, but I couldn't explain what I'd seen, let alone how I'd escaped. I quit smoking, left my long-haul job, and moved near my brother in Denmark. I started helping him with his growing timber business. It's been 3 years. I'm still clean for what it's worth, because that night made me realize how fragile human life is, and how any second could be our last. The worst night of my life began after I walked into the Green Creek Motel. It was an isolated motel just along the interstate. I'd been on a long 9-hour drive back home, and I was looking for a cheap place to spend the night. I was extremely tired as I walked up to the receptionist and asked for a room, but the receptionist looked at me and said,
I'm sorry, sir, but all our rooms are already booked.
Could you please check again? I'm so tired, and I don't want to sleep in my car. There has to be at least one empty room.
As I said before, there are no rooms available at the moment. I'm so sorry, sir. There's really nothing I can do.
The motel was the only option I had, as there was nothing else for miles, and I really didn't want to sleep in my car, but it seemed like I had no other choice. However, a nice-looking man who heard our conversation walked up to the receptionist and said, "You can have our room. I was just headed out." The receptionist then looked at him and asked,
What about your wife, Mr. Bernard?
Oh, she checked out earlier this morning. I was gonna go meet her at home. I immediately thanked the man and shook his hand. He then responded with a kind smile before saying, "Hope you have a good night's sleep." The receptionist told me that they'd need to quickly clean the room before I spent the night. She then asked me how long I was staying, and I decided to book the room for the weekend, as I thought it'd be a good idea to take a break from the road for a couple of days. As I walked into the room, my nose picked up a faint smell, and I assumed it was coming from the bathroom. The bed was also uncomfortable, but the room was spacious, and I felt like it was a good value for the price. After taking a long shower, I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. For some unexplainable reason, I just kept turning, and when I finally dozed off, I had the strangest dream. I was standing in a dark hallway, and I could hear a woman screaming in agony. I could tell she was trying to say something through her screams, but I couldn't understand what she wanted. When I woke up the next morning, I had a splitting headache. It felt like the worst night of my life, and I began to wonder if I would have been better off just sleeping in my car. However, I had already paid for the entire weekend, so I took an Advil and went to get some breakfast. Even though I'd tried to put that horrible night behind me, I couldn't stop hearing that woman's screams in my head, and it kept bothering me throughout the day. It had become unbearable, and I hoped that I was coming down with a fever. I told myself that it was probably stress from the long drive and that I just needed a good night's sleep. However, I had another bizarre dream the following night. I was falling into a black abyss for what seemed like an eternity, and when I landed, I was lying on my bed in the motel. I couldn't move my arms or legs, but I could tell someone was lying next to me. It was a pale woman, and I tried calling out to her, but I couldn't speak. The woman then slowly raised her head and looked at me, allowing me to see her face in full view. I let out a blood-curdling scream as her skin was falling off her face and her eye sockets were empty. The woman then started repeating the words,
Get off me! You're so heavy! I just want to rest. Please put me to rest.
I've never been so frightened in my life, and I woke up screaming, covered in sweat. I'd never been a superstitious person, but I could tell something was seriously wrong with that motel room. The foul odor in my room had also become overwhelmingly nauseating, and I had a disturbing suspicion. So I went to the receptionist and asked her to check my mattress. She looked at me like I was crazy, before assuring me that the room was clean and that there was nothing wrong with the mattress. I wasn't convinced, so I took out my pocket knife, went back to my room, and ripped apart the mattress. The receptionist thought I'd gone crazy and threatened to call the police if I didn't stop. However, she went deadly silent when I uncovered a woman's corpse hidden inside the large mattress. The authorities were immediately contacted, and the body was identified as Abigail Bernard. She was the wife of the man who'd given me his room, and the police sent several officers to his house, but he was already long gone. Detectives carried out an investigation and found out that the couple had gotten into an altercation the night before that turned deadly. Guests in nearby rooms told detectives that they'd heard Abigail screaming on the day Bernard checked out. While this was never confirmed, detectives believe the couple got into a heated fight, and Bernard killed Abigail. He then expertly sealed her corpse inside the motel's mattress because he couldn't carry her body out without being caught on the motel's cameras. I was never able to recover from the fact that I'd slept on a woman's rotting corpse for 2 nights at the Green Creek Motel. The sight of her rotting body lying inside the mattress was truly gruesome, and I couldn't imagine how a kind-looking man could commit such horrors against his own wife. I never slept in a motel after that night, and even though several months have passed, on certain nights, when I close my eyes, I can still hear Abigail screaming in the distance. When we got close, the driver's window rolled down. We asked if the man in the driver's seat had a jack. He nodded silently, pointed to the trunk, and then motioned for us to wait while he edged the car forward a little to give us space. The sedan started backing up toward us slowly. He opened the trunk. Right as Harmony grabbed the jack, the rear door flew open, and a woman fell out onto the gravel as if someone had shoved her. The car hit the gas and vanished instantly before we could even blink. The woman was in rough shape. One side of her face was swollen. She had rope burns on her wrists, and she was barely conscious. Harmony, who'd already taken some emergency care classes, immediately knelt down and checked for a pulse.
I can't find a pulse. Oh my god, Jewel, what do we do?
She sobbed. I was horrified. My blood had run cold. Just a few moments earlier, we were so happy. Harmony and I were on the back roads to our friend Becca's farmhouse in rural Tennessee to spend our summer vacation together. We were both 19, done with our first year of community college, and we'd been looking forward to this trip all semester. She was in the driver's seat of her Civic, with a playlist she'd been building since April. I was half asleep in the passenger seat when she tapped my arm.
Don't look now. That car has taken every turn we've taken for the last 15 minutes.
I checked the rearview mirror and saw a black sedan a few car lengths behind us, keeping pace.
Probably just a coincidence. You know how the roads are out here.
I shrugged. Harmony nodded and kept driving, but I kept my eyes on the rearview mirror. When we hit Route 70, she took the cutoff onto Catholic Creek Road instead of staying on the main highway. It's a narrower stretch that runs through the woods and shaves about 25 minutes off the drive, but it was pretty isolated. Nobody used that road unless they knew their way around. The sedan took the turn right behind us. Neither of us said anything for a moment.
Okay, that's definitely not a coincidence. We are being followed.
I told her I was calling 911, but before I could even get through to the dispatcher, the sedan floored it and whipped past us. As it went by, I looked at the driver and saw a pale, middle-aged guy, still as a statue, staring straight ahead. His eyes flickered over to me for a split second before the car disappeared around a bend. We laughed it off, trying to shake the weird feeling. About 5 minutes later, our front right tire blew. Harmony pulled over onto the gravel shoulder. We could see shredded glass on the road. Both of our phones had 0 bars, and the sun was going down fast.
Babe, look!
Harmony pointed. The black sedan was parked up the road, maybe 200 feet ahead, on the same side. We sat in the car arguing about what to do.
We can't just wait here until it's dark.
I snapped.
You have the taser, right?
She nodded and grabbed it. We got out and walked up to the sedan. And now, here we were, in the middle of nowhere with a dead body. We started arguing about what to do. It was a remote spot, and if any local found a body next to a car with a flat tire, we'd instantly look like the killers. We were literally trapped next to the evidence. Panicking that the police would suspect us of a crime we hadn't committed, we hid the body in our trunk before fixing the tire. Once we were done, Harmony drove like a maniac. About 10 minutes in, we spotted that same black sedan at a really dusty, super old gas station. It only had one rusted-out pump and a tiny, dim cafe attached. I squinted and could see the car was vacant. We figured they must be inside. As we slowly pulled into the lot, I quickly scanned the outside of the building, but couldn't find any CCTV cameras.
Let's move her back, quick!
We hurriedly got her out and lifted the trunk lid, but before we could move her, she coughed and gasped awake. We froze. The woman sat up coughing. She told us her husband and his friend had tried to murder her to hide her husband's affair. I could barely understand a word she was saying.
Gosh, girl, give me a second, I'll ring 911.
Harmony responded. She begged us not to.
I'm really fine. I want to take my revenge by myself.
I watched her walk back to the black sedan. She turned, smiled weakly at us, and got in. Harmony and I exchanged uncertain looks. Eventually, we got back in our car and drove the rest of the way to Becca's, but we could barely sleep. The next morning, a local news alert popped up on Becca's phone. It said the black sedan had crashed the night before, wrapping itself around a utility pole on a county road about 14 miles from the gas station. Both guys in the front seat were dead. The preliminary reports said the car had been going well over 100 miles per hour when it wrecked. A line in the article stated that the medical examiner had confirmed a third victim in the back seat. It was a woman, but based on her body temperature and other indicators, she had been dead for over 12 hours before the accident. I looked at Harmony, sitting across from me at Becca's kitchen table. She had gone pale. The woman we had driven around with for 15 minutes, the one who'd held my wrist and begged me not to call the cops, had been dead since before we even found her. We finally gave a statement to the county sheriff 2 days later. The deputy who took our story wrote everything down. The investigation into the 2 dead men wrapped up a few weeks later. I still drive through rural Tennessee sometimes when I visit Becca. I always take the main highway now, and I always slow down to look whenever I see a car pulled over on the shoulder. I have no idea why. Logically, there's no way looking will ever help anything, but I can't help myself. We moved to Westlake right after Dad passed away from a heart attack when I was 6. Mom thought Hardin County had too many ghosts, and we needed a clean slate. I missed the huge house, the tall trees, and all that open land for a bit, but once school started and I made the baseball team, Hardin County became a place I used to live. Eventually, Mom also started teaching at an elementary school a few blocks away, and met another teacher who actually made her laugh again. As the years went by, both of us moved on, but the recurring nightmare stayed. I started having it maybe a year after Dad passed, and it never really stopped. In the dream, I see myself standing in the woods at night while it's pouring, with thunder and lightning rumbling overhead. There's a small cabin right at the tree line with a single light on inside. I head up to the window and see a guy sitting in a rocking chair, facing away from me. He rocks for a moment before he slowly turns around and stares. His face is covered in thick, old-school stage makeup. His eyes are bulging out, and his teeth are crooked. Up close, he looks even more horrifying. "Come close, Peter," he calls, laughing like a maniac. I start panicking, but can't move. My teeth chatter, and right as he stands up to grab me, I wake up sweating and screaming for help. For the longest time, I just figured it was the grief messing with my head. My mom always backed that up too. She'd tell me I had a wild imagination and that I shouldn't overthink things. So I kept it to myself. But the dream didn't go away and kept showing up well into my mid-20s. Right before homecoming that year, my girlfriend Kathy walked out on me. She told me she couldn't handle being with a guy who constantly screamed and talked in his sleep. That was my wake-up call. I knew I needed to get some professional help. A friend pointed me toward a psychiatrist named Dr. Halloran. I laid it all out for him. After listening to my story, he told me that having a dream this vivid and consistent for over 20 years definitely wasn't normal. That could be a buried memory, Peter. Sometimes your brain locks away traumatic fragments in your subconscious, even when your conscious mind can't remember them. He suggested the only way to make the dream stop would be to go back to that old property and figure out exactly what happened, but I don't remember where that property was. I was trying to pinpoint its location based on the fuzzy memories I had left when the hospital called. Mom had taken a tumble at school, and the scans were alarming. She sounded more drained than scared on the phone. She told me she wanted to see me and handle some paperwork. When I drove up to Cleveland, there was a folder waiting for me. Inside was the deed to our ancestral Hardin County property.
Sell it as soon as you can. Don't let it sit there. Promise me you won't.
Her desperation sounded weird, but I thought maybe the memories of Dad were still too much for her. I took the folder home and let it sit on my desk for 2 weeks before I finally got around to spreading the property map out under my lamp one night. The place was way bigger than I thought, It was mostly woods, but tucked in the northwest corner was this tiny, unlabeled square. I tried to remember what it was, but couldn't. Drawn by dread and curiosity, I headed out to the county the first day off I got. The old farmhouse was still there, but barely standing. The roof was caving in on one side and the windows were all smashed out. I spent a while hiking around the property until I finally reached the northwest corner. I found the cabin exactly where the map showed it. It was merely a bunch of weathered gray boards with the woods closing in from every direction. As soon as I laid eyes on it, I got this pit in my stomach. My heart started pounding as I walked in. Inside, the place smelled like rotting wood and mildew. I kept walking and came across a trap door in the floor with a massive padlock on it. My vision started flashing, and my hands were shaking so badly that it took me a while to finally pry it open. Once it finally gave way, a blast of cold, damp air hit me square in the face. Looking down, I saw familiar concrete steps heading into the dark basement. The walls were lined with shelves overflowing with old film canisters, VHS tapes, and trashed cardboard sleeves and heavy binders. I reached for the nearest binder and flipped it open. I couldn't even make it 30 seconds before I lost my lunch. In each one of them, my dad was doing stuff I couldn't even utter. The people in those videos were the same ones who'd gone missing 2 decades ago. I remembered them from the posters and newspapers, and in every single shot, he was wearing that same thick, creepy stage makeup. I sat there in my car out in the field for what felt like forever, as everything started coming back to me in bits and pieces. I was only 6, and it was pouring rain. I woke up to the screams and laughter and followed the light to the cabin window. There, I saw him through the glass, plucking teeth out of a bloody, barely conscious man. My mom found me standing out there in the storm, carried me back to the house, and tucked me in without ever saying a single word about it. She knew. I called the Hardin County Sheriff right from that field and told them exactly what was in the basement before I drove back to Cleveland. One glance at me, and Mom knew I'd figured it out. She broke down crying, telling me she was only trying to protect her family. I was disgusted and walked out. We haven't really talked since. Forensics spent about 2 weeks tearing the place apart and found the remains of 4 men buried in the woods. My dad had been dead for 11 years, so he never had to answer for any of it. The nightmares stopped that night I made that call. I wish I could say it feels like closure, but it mostly feels like I traded one mystery for a much darker reality. I was fiddling with my camera settings to get a better shot when I saw something move behind the bush on my screen. I zoomed in and completely froze.
Darla, check this out.
My throat had gone so dry I could barely speak. My best friend, who had been messing with Snapchat filters for the past 10 minutes, snapped her head up. She looked at me before following my gaze. Her eyes widened. Unaware of our presence, the man continued dragging the woman deeper into the woods. He was tall and built like a bull. The woman seemed to be in her mid-20s and was totally limp. Her feet dragged through the grass behind her. Before I could even move, Darla started recording, following him. She muttered something about needing to get the scene clear before doing anything.
Are you crazy?
I hissed, scrambling after her. She didn't even look at me and kept adjusting her lens. Suddenly, the guy stopped, dropped his backpack, and pulled out a roll of duct tape and some rope. My stomach dropped.
Darla, stop! He kidnapped her! We have to call 911 right now!
She glanced at me, annoyed, like I was interrupting something important.
And miss this? This is going to be huge, and we're getting actual evidence. Just give it 10 minutes. We get the footage, then we call.
I stared at her, horrified.
Have you lost your mind?
She promised it wouldn't take more than 10 minutes. Against every instinct I had, I stayed. I didn't know it yet, but I was making a mistake that could have been the last of our lives. But I loved and trusted Darla. She had been my best friend since middle school. She lived 2 blocks away, and every Saturday that wasn't gray, she'd drag me out to Riverside Park for snaps. She had this photography account with a few thousand followers on Snapchat and was obsessed with chasing the golden hour. I mostly tagged along because it was usually a nice way to kill an evening. We'd grab snacks at the park entrance, wander the lake path, and I'd scroll through my phone while she snapped photos and asked for my opinion. That Saturday in April, we were about an hour into our usual loop, way out by the tree line. The light was hitting everything just right, so I pulled out my phone to snap a few shots of my own. That's when I saw the man dragging the woman behind the bushes.
Darla, enough!
I hissed, my heart slamming against my ribs.
We have to call 911.
My thumb hovered over the 911 dialer.
Wait!
Darla snatched it up.
Just 1 more minute. We need proof, or nobody's going to believe us.
We crept through the bushes, watching from 20 feet away. He was methodical, like he was doing yard work. He pulled out tape and rope. The woman on the ground didn't move. Darla was live streaming. Her phone was lighting up with DMs and people screaming at her to call the cops. The numbers were insane.
Darla, stop! We're calling now.
1 more minute.
Just as I reached for my phone, the guy looked up and our eyes met. He blinked, and before I could even gasp, he was on us. Darla shrieked and bolted, but I was too slow. He covered the distance in a heartbeat and grabbed my arm. Yanking me back, he shoved me into the dirt and pinned my wrist with his knee. The next thing I knew, he had a knife to my throat.
Drop it!
He barked. I let my phone fall into the dirt. My heart was going a mile a minute. I couldn't know what to do. He started talking trash about how my friend had ditched me and saying some really sick stuff about what he was going to do next. I was shaking so hard I could barely move. I was crying, begging him to just let me go and promising I wouldn't say a word to anyone.
Now where's the fun in that?
He sneered. About time, the woman on the ground started to wake up. I saw her eyes open and she realized what was happening. She started trying to crawl away, being as quiet as possible, but he heard her anyway. He spun around, and before she could bolt, he caught her and shoved the knife in her ribs. I screamed. He backhanded me to shut me up and went after her again. There was blood everywhere. It got all over my shirt and his hands. The woman looked like she was trying to scream, but no sound was coming out. He dropped her like she was a piece of trash and turned back to me, grabbing me by my hair. He had the knife inches from my neck when a gunshot went off from the hedge. He stumbled back. It didn't even register what happened until I saw Darla standing there with 2 cops. One of them still had his gun aimed right at the guy. She'd sprinted all the way to the park entrance and found a patrol car. She actually made it in time. Turns out the guy was David Winskin. He was a drug addict and the woman's stepbrother and had been trying to extort money from his stepfather. When the dad didn't take him seriously, David lost it and kidnapped her on her way home from work. The woman survived. She was in surgery for hours and lost a lot of blood, but she's okay now. Darla and I spent the whole night at the station giving statements. When my parents picked me up, my mom didn't say a word, but she held my hand like she was scared I'd disappear. The detective told us the Snapchat video was good evidence, but it was really stupid of us. He said that the time spent filming instead of calling 911 was time they could have used and helped us avoid all that blood and injuries. Darla kept apologizing for weeks over her foolishness, crying about how that 1 minute could have cost me my life. She's right, but I feel just as responsible. I could have just called 911 myself. I could have saved that woman and myself a lot of trouble. It was stupid of me, and it could have ended a lot worse. But I can't go back and change it. I have to live with it my whole life. And I've learned.
Did you hear that?
Riley whispered, gripping my arm tightly.
Yeah, I think we should bail.
I let out a shaky little laugh. Riley scoffed, yanking her arm away.
Right. So you can come back later and claim my discovery. Forget it.
She immediately dropped down low and started creeping toward that cabin window. I hissed at her to stop, but she just ignored me. I finally gave up and followed. We got to the side of the cabin where there was a low window. It was really dirty, but the frame was messed up, leaving this tiny gap. We peeked in. Inside the cabin was pitch dark, with only one lamp glowing on a table. A woman was lying on the floor, with the wrists and ankles tied up. Her hair was a mess, and she was crying, wincing in pain. A tall guy stood over her, grinning like a clown. He was snapping photos with a small camera. She was whispering, begging him to stop, but he just ignored her. My twin sister Riley and I shared a look. Both of us wanted to bolt, but we had to help the lady. At that time, we were 10, basically growing up in the woods behind our neighborhood in Asheville. We'd spent the whole of our weekend playing treasure hunt there. Our parents were cool with it, as long as we were back before the street lights popped on. We had our own named trails, a creek we dammed up every summer, and this hollow tree where we kept all our important junk. We knew those woods the way some kids know their own backyard. So, one late summer Sunday, when Riley came tearing up, saying she had found this little cabin buried back in the trees and weeds, I had to see it. She took me farther than normal, following the creek, and found it through a break in some super overgrown bushes. It was rather old, the boards were grayed out, and the roof was dipping on one side. We'd been exploring those woods forever, so the fact that we'd never seen this place before felt both crazy and super exciting. We were both maybe 20 feet from the front door when this super loud scream made us stop cold. And that's how we got into this situation with this scary man and this woman almost hanging on her life. We waited until the man put his camera down on the table and walked out the front door. We could hear his boots on the porch. Riley pointed at the back of the cabin. She had spotted a door. We crawled to it. Riley tried the handle, and it opened. We stayed low and moved fast. Riley reached the woman first and started fumbling with the ropes on her wrists, while I kept a panicked eye on the front door. The woman's eyes nearly popped out of her head when she saw us.
Leave.
She sobbed, shaking her head, but Riley already had one hand loose, and I'd managed to free her ankles. Just as she managed to scramble up, the front door flew open, and the guy barged in. We bolted before he could even get close. For someone who'd just been tied up, that woman was surprisingly fast. We hit the woods at full sprint. I could hear the guy right behind us, crashing through the brush and screaming at us to stop, yelling we had no idea what we were doing.
This way.
I grabbed her hand and steered her toward the fence, while Riley took the lead. We made it to the fence line in maybe 5 minutes. I squeezed through the usual gap. Riley followed, and I turned back to help the woman through. But she'd stopped right at the edge of the trees.
If you cross that fence, I'll make sure the whole of your bloodline feels sorry, Monica!
The man yelled. The woman was wailing now. She told us she was sorry, but we should just head home and forget all about it.
No.
She hiccuped before she turned around and walked back into the woods. Riley and I ran to our house and told our dad everything. He immediately called 911. Officers went to the cabin that night. By the time they got there, it was burning. The fire had been set recently from inside. When it burned out, there was nothing left but the foundation and some metal from the roof. They never found the man or the woman. Investigators checked missing persons reports against the description we gave of her for months afterward, but nothing matched. I'm a corporate attorney now, and Riley's a nurse over in Charlotte. We still bring it up every time we hang out. We've gotten over the trauma, but the whole episode wouldn't leave our heads. We still can't wrap our heads around why someone so close to getting away would choose to go back to that nightmare. What kind of hold did he have on her that she chose that agony voluntarily? Riley and I have spent years playing that over in our minds. We still couldn't settle on an answer. Whenever I see stories about people staying in messed up situations, I think of her. From the outside, it makes no sense, but there was obviously something going on that we couldn't see. I just really hope she eventually found a way out for real. I worked as a motel manager for most of my life, and during all that time, I witnessed unspeakable horrors. From shady drug dealings gone horribly wrong to psychotic guests leaving their rooms in a deplorable state. However, nothing was worse than what I witnessed on the 16th of May, 2009. I got to work early that morning and went about my usual routine. There were 30 rooms in the motel, but one particular room was always booked year-round by a man named Dr. Lucas Howard. Lucas Howard was a self-proclaimed plastic surgeon who didn't have a license to operate. However, he was a close family friend of the motel's owner, so they'd given him a spacious room at the back of the motel to carry out his illegal operations in exchange for some of his profits. I was appalled when I uncovered these disturbing and illegal acts, but I couldn't report what was going on to the authorities, as the owner threatened to fire me if I ever said anything. I desperately needed the job, as my wife couldn't work after she'd fallen sick, and we had 5 kids to feed. I had no other choice but to keep quiet, and with every passing day, I'd watch several of Dr. Howard's clients walk through those motel doors. Most of them were desperate young women who couldn't afford to pay for a licensed plastic surgeon. I always pitied these women, as they often left looking a lot worse than they came in. It was hard for me to watch what Dr. Howard was doing to these young women, as I had 2 daughters back at home, and I could tell most of these women were coerced or pressured into it. Even though I'd sworn not to say anything, I made it very clear to Dr. Howard that I didn't agree with what he was doing, as I always gave him dirty looks whenever he walked into the motel. We had an altercation after he arrived that morning, as he looked at me and said, "You better wipe that smug, righteous look off your face, Dean. You think I can't see you judging my clients and me every day? Who the hell do you think you are?" "Well, it's hard to keep a straight face, Howard, when I know you're cutting young women open in the back and sending them home badly disfigured. Regardless of your close relationship with the owners, I am still the motel manager, and I have never agreed with the illegal operations you carry out at this motel. Don't forget that my profits are what pay your salary, and I could easily have you fired tomorrow, so keep that attitude in check, Dean, if you want to keep your job and afford the medications for your sick wife." He walked away, looking down on me, and I could do nothing but grit my teeth in anger, as I couldn't afford to get fired. I knew Dr. Howard was a twisted man who would go to any lengths to get his way. That was why he always threatened to take my job if I ever spoke up, as he usually reminded me of my 5 kids and my bedridden wife, who all needed my support. After Dr. Howard went into his office to see his clients, I went to water the large potted plants that the owners had asked me to place across the motel. When I was done, I saw a young woman around the age of 22 walk into the motel. I could tell she was extremely nervous as she walked up to me and said,
Hello, sir. I'm looking for Dr. Howard.
I could tell she was really scared. "You don't have to do this. Whatever he promised you is not worth it. I've seen what he does to other young women like you. So please, just trust me and go home." Before I could finish my sentence, Dr. Howard came out of his office and said, "I've told you not to talk to my clients, Dean." He then turned to the girl and said, "Ignore whatever he said, Anastasia. You're in safe hands with me," before leading her away to begin the operation. After a couple of hours, I heard him yell, "Dean, I need you here right now!" I rushed in to see what was going on, and I screamed in horror as Anastasia's butchered body lay lifeless on the table. I couldn't take it anymore. "I can't do this anymore, Howard. I'm calling the cops." However, before I could pick up my phone, Dr. Howard put a bloody scalpel to my neck as he said, "Then I'll slit your throat and throw you in the wood chipper just like the rest of them. Be reasonable, Dean. There's no need to play the righteous Samaritan, as you're just as guilty as I am at this point.
It'd also be sad to leave your kids and your sick wife without your support. So shut your mouth and help me get rid of her body.
I thought about fighting him off and running to the cops, but I knew I didn't stand a chance against him, so I agreed. We both carried her bloody corpse to a wood chipper out back, where Dr. Howard usually dumped the bodies from his failed operations. It took everything I had not to throw up as we tossed her into the wood chipper, along with the remains of several previous victims who hadn't survived their surgeries. After they were all chopped into bits, I wondered what he usually did with their remains, so I asked. Dr. Howard turned and looked at me with a sick grin. Well, I knew it'd be a shame to let their corpses go to waste, so I've been using their shredded remains as natural manure for all the potted plants that adorn the motel. I had no idea he'd been doing something so horrific, and I was forced to stay quiet. I also lied to the authorities when they eventually came to ask about Howard's missing clients, as I told them I knew nothing. I was his accomplice now, and even though they'd allow me to keep my job as a reward for staying silent, I knew I could never look at my wife or daughters in the eyes ever again after the horrific things I did that night.